So I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Trixie Harvey, a PhD in botany, who lived in Mount Albert for a long time, probably in Councillor Casey and Councillor Fletcher's electorate, but then 20 odd years ago moved to Waitakere. She was her and her husband Bruce were extremely active in the conservation network. She was initially a pharmacist and so was her husband, and they met in a pharmacy in Waikato and brought up their family, came back here, and in her 40s she went to university and got her PhD in botany. She was actually instrumental in the development of gold kiwi fruit, which we know is a huge export earner. But on a local scene, and actually I suppose on a national scene, she was a huge supporter and protector of the environment, and particularly Waitakere Rangers. She was a member of Waitakere Rangers Protection Society. She was on every committee that was going, but she also developed the Waitakere Rangers Conservation Network, and that was pulling together all the groups that had a love of the Rangers and wanted to protect our environment, both the flora and fauna. She also co-wrote the huge and wonderful tome Waitakere Rangers and other publications. She was a quiet but diligent worker for the environment, and she passed at the end of August, and she had a huge funeral, which was a testament. She had many leaders in the community there to really stand up and speak and talk about the effect and the good things that she'd done for them, and for really not just for them but for the community. So I just wanted to acknowledge her passing and our condolences to Bruce and his family. He's a strong man, but we know it's not quite the same. That was a very powerful partnership, and our family out west will rally around. So we've lost an amazing stalwart at 80, but her work will live on through all the groups in the community that will carry on that work. Thank you. Kia ora. Yeah, that's weird. Is it working? Just if your mics don't come on, give them a little press. We seem to sort of need a bit of a little reboot at the moment, such is life. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Bartley, Deputy Mayor Cashmore. There's a very good body double you've got there, Councillor Cashmore. Not me. Oh, please. It's always easy to get the two of you mixed up.
Thank you.
Councillor.
I think you just insulted both of them.
Not like you either.
It's a bad start for the day. I'm sure it'll carry on. Councillor Fletcher for lateness, Councillor Collins, Cooper and Member Brown for early departure. Anything else we need to add to that? Oh gosh, we'll be well done by then. I'll move those if someone would like to second that.
Yeah.
Councillor Philip Piner. All those in favour please say
Aye.
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 Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. There are, well, I'll just invite people as the item comes up. If you do feel that there is a declaration of interest, please make it known. And I'm happy to move the minutes of the 14th of August, including the confidential section. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Desley Simpson. Any comments? Nope. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. There are no petitions and no public input was requested. Local board input, no, not. We thought there might be local board input, but had Tracy actually requested? Okay. We'll just keep an eye out for Tracy Mulholland, who had requested to speak on
Te Kite Urukuruku, and the Māori place names associated with that project, but not here. So if Tracy arrives, we'll invite her to speak. Oh, we've just received apologies from Tracy, so she won't be here. Extraordinary business, there is none. And we've just had a request for precedence of business to be moved, which I will move that we accept the item 10, which is the mobile library item at this stage. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Filipaina. Item 10 on the mobile library at this stage. We bring it forward, precedence of business. I'll speak more clearly, Councillor. So just to be clear, moving the mobile library, item 10, up to be taken now. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And I'll invite Daryl to come forward. It's page 99, just in case people are wondering where we've got to. Thanks, Daryl. Just I want to acknowledge before you start the huge amount of work that's gone into the preparation of this item, the meetings with all our local boards, and certainly the amount of energy that library staff have put into making this work. Thank you.
Morena, ko Daryl Solgen taku ingoa, ko o Te Po Arahi, Pātaka Kōrero a Hapari, ki te raki mi te uru, Pātaka Kōrero Kaiwa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So good morning, my name's Daryl Solgen. I am the head of community libraries for North and West, and also the mobile and access unit, and that's why we're here to present this report today. Which way am I pointing, Tam? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So I know you've all had the report, but I just wanted to highlight a few key points from the report, and then just wanted to focus really on the shifts, the change from the current to the future that we're proposing to broaden and expand the regional mobile library service. So key point number one is it requires no new money. In the previous LTP, governing body had approved capital for purchase of a replacement vehicle for the central library vehicle, and that's all in train. It increases the reach and service to Aucklanders. The service has remained almost unchanged since amalgamation. There's significant proportions of Auckland who experience real barriers to access. There's been a high level of local board support. So, as Chair mentioned, following an original presentation to this committee some time ago, I presented at the local board Chairs Forum, and subsequently the recommendation was to contact each individual local board, which I did, and of the 15 local boards that elected to have a workshop, I workshopped through the proposal with them, seeking feedback. Others were done by memo at their request, and also spent a morning with the senior people's panel. I think one of the big changes that we'll cover is a much greater focus on having impact, and a much greater focus on having impact will actually make the most difference. The proposal will result in much greater and more meaningful engagement with Māori. It supports volunteers, not volunteers to carry out baseline library work, but it gives us the opportunity to expand services, particularly in areas where librarians would not traditionally operate. It removes duplication. I know all of us at Council are very keen to do things smarter and eliminate duplication, so this does a lot of that. And then ultimately as well, the proposal will result in much greater well-being and safety for our staff. Just wanted to cover off some numbers to paint the current picture and the what's really behind the drive to make some changes. So first year first thing off is year on year, the service is reducing and the number of people who are using it. So unless we make some changes to make the service more meaningful and more relevant to more Aucklanders, we can't expect that trend to change. So the libraries, the mobile libraries as they stand at the moment, effectively operate in a quadrant of Auckland, basically legacy bound, operating like a two weekly milk run, so doing the same places every second Monday and following the same cycle, stopping quickly, moving on. And because of the way that we operate, those vehicles that service is effectively only open 19 hours a week. So we've got 168 hours a week that we could be operating, and we're operating for 19 of them. Because of the nature of the way that we operate, the service is, we're only spending an hour or longer at 14% of the stops that we go to. So very quick transactional visits. We're not at a place at any length of time for the most part to be able to actually have some impact and do anything other than the quick transaction of some books. And despite Auckland Libraries, one of our reasons for being our raison d'etre to help lift literacy, particularly among young people, we're not doing that because we're only spending 14% of our time with young Aucklanders. Possibly the most, not controversial, but the piece of the pie that local boards have had most interest in that we're proposing to change is that a lot of the residential stops that we go to, so the bus parks on a roadside has done since amalgamation, we at about 30% of those stops, less than 6 people use that service. So it's a very expensive way to look after a very small number of people. We have some stops where 1 person will hop on, 2 people. We have some stops that we go to where no people use that stop, and we're saying that this is not a smart way to use the assets and the money of Aucklanders, that we can be using that to make a great deal more impact in other parts of Auckland that are crying out for library services and struggle with access. And then following on from that, we know that of the people that use those residential stops, which is what most people think about when they think about mobile library services, and 60% of those customers also use a community library. So we know that access is not an issue. It's convenient that it parks outside their house, but we know that at some other time in the week, that person hops in their car or on the bus, goes to the doctor or the supermarket or wherever and uses a community library. So we're duplicating a lot of service there. And then finally, we take these big vehicles to places like rest homes, pensioner housing, retirement villages, and these are not actually the easiest vehicles in the world to access if you're a bit older or if you have mobility issues. So straight away, the vehicle that we're taking there is preventing a lot of older Aucklanders especially from being able to use the service. And when they hop on, there's not much room on board. It's largely a transactional book type service. And one of the big things that we're proposing to change is the way that we look after older Aucklanders, and I'll touch on that when we come to the shifts part. So despite all this, despite the fact that we're serving a whole bunch of Aucklanders that can get library services at their local community library, apart from the fact that we say that we're all about lifting literacy in young people, we're not putting our money where our mouth is with the way that the mobile libraries are currently set up. Meanwhile, we know there are significant parts of Auckland that are really struggling to access library services, and by stopping some of the duplication and by stopping some of the stuff that's merely convenient, we can shift resource to places where it really is going to have some impact. So I'll just talk through these just very quickly. We're moving from 4 vehicles with 4 staff to 5 vehicles with a team of around about 11 to 14, depending on how that's structured. I think 3 really key things are the new roles. So there's a new Māori mobile librarian, which will be a fluent Te Reo speaker, which gives us an opportunity to much more meaningfully engage with Māori at Marae, especially places like Kura Kaupapa and other Māori learning institutions where bilingualism isn't what they're after. also a housebound coordinator, so there are significant numbers of Aucklanders who cannot access library services often through disability, other reasons as well. Some of it might be temporary, some of it might be permanent. So we've been trialling in the Henderson Massey Local Board for a while now a housebound service that engages volunteers. So it's a little bit like Meals on Wheels. We learn from a housebound customer the types of genres that they might like to read. Our staff back at the community libraries curate bags of books that relate to what their interests are, and then the volunteer delivers those books from the community library to the customer. And we know that often it's as much about the human contact as it is about the delivery of the actual collection, and the feedback has been great. We haven't got the resources to do that ourselves, and it relies on volunteers having cars. It relies on their short bursts of time and energy. But by having a housebound coordinator, it gives us the ability to recruit volunteers, and we know there are lots of volunteers that want to work at libraries. And this gives us a chance to train volunteers and have volunteers doing work that we otherwise could not do. And it's expanding our service, and it's just a win-win for everyone. Currently, the mobile library service operates Monday to Wednesday, 9 till 5, which just happens to be when most Aucklanders are at work or studying for the most part. So the expanded service will give us the opportunity to operate 7 days and outside of business hours. The current service targets everyone everywhere. We're saying that we've only got X amount of resource. We really need to focus it on where it's going to have the greatest impact. There's been a real emphasis on presence and on vehicles, so a real emphasis on frequency of the buses zooming around, being seen to be lots of places all the time. And what we're saying is that it's actually counter to delivering a quality service in a number of instances, and in fact those big buses are barriers to entry. And so that's what I just wanted to touch on when I mentioned about visiting and supporting our older Aucklanders. Currently the bus rocks up, a handful of people can access it. Meanwhile, back inside the retirement home or the rest home or in the other pensioner housing, people who might like to access the service can't because of mobility issues. So what we're proposing to change is, let's take away the bus from those places where it's actually preventing access. Let's take the bus to places like early childhood centres and schools, and instead let's have a team of our people go into these retirement villages or these other places, not for half an hour like we're doing currently, but for an hour and a half, a couple of hours, and rather than just delivering books, while they're there, let's have our expert librarians helping these customers access the collection. We'll still take books for them, but at the same time we can sit down with them, train them to use the iPad that the family's given them, that they're struggling how to use, to be able to connect with family, for example, through Facebook. And I've seen a number of those instances, and a number of older Aucklanders who it's been like a miracle that all of a sudden they know how to see photos and things that their grandkids are doing. So that's quite a change. We can curate book clubs together. So at the moment, individuals hop on in and off the bus. We can actually be building small communities within a place like that by having book clubs. So at the end of the day, this is an example of the quality versus quality thing, and we need to get over the fact that not taking a big bus to a retirement village is a degradation of service. In fact, what we're proposing is a significantly enhanced service to what those people are getting at the moment. So I think you can see the rest is there. I've touched on the main parts of the proposal. We're not asking. What we're really looking for is approval and endorsement of the principles and the direction of the proposal. In every local board, there'll be some operational changes, and what we're proposing in terms of the detail isn't written in stone forever. We're proposing that we will learn and evolve the service. We will discover communities that we might not be touching that could benefit, and we'll be visiting other communities or schools that might say to us after a while, you know what, we're actually good on our own now. You've helped us grow our capability, and we can use our resource to go off and help some others. I'm sure there's some questions.
I've got Councillor Casey, or first of all, Member Blair, Councillor Casey, and then we'll go from there. Member Blair.
O tuatahi me mihi atu ki a koe rā e Darryl, o tēnei te wiki o te reo. Me tō mihi mai ki a mātou, tēnei te kaunihira. Ka ki te kaha i rungi a koe i te reo. Me tō mahi o te whare puka puka nā mihi atu ki a koe rā. So just thank you for your mihi to us. Celebrating the reo, just saying it's good to see someone passionate about what their work and delivering to the community. There's no question really just to support, especially in terms of your connection to the Māori communities. This is one way which we can uplift the literacy, people reading with their children, and impacting on educational success. So, as you know, Māori are hard to get to sometimes and hard to get out to community libraries. We just wanted to tautoko ki a koe rā, me tō rōpū mo tēnei mahi. So just to support. Thank you for your work.
Kia ora, Member Blair. Councillor Casey.
Darryl, one of the things that you intend to do with the buses, is to attend more regional and local events. And every time I go to, I'm sure most councillors do this as well, every time I go to an event, I always visit the bus, and I've seen librarians dressed as pirates.
Yeah.
I've seen storytelling with kids swarming to the buses. I've seen themed collections. Can you just talk a bit more about what you will be enabled to do with the buses?
Sure, and that's a great point, because we want to be, I describe it, we want to be where when and where Aucklanders are. So at the moment, there's a lot of places that Aucklanders don't expect us to be, and times that they don't expect to see us, and we want to change that. So we think that there are even more opportunities with a 7-day service and with a bumped up team to attend these events at parks, at beaches. We think there's some cool opportunities at council-owned campgrounds that we don't currently attend. And the big thing for us, quite apart from the fact that staff have a great time, it's all good, and it's important that we all enjoy our work. We want to be engaging with Aucklanders who aren't our customers. So we're really proud of how much Aucklanders love Auckland libraries, and you only have to make some suggestions about some significant changes to see how that manifests itself. So it's great that the Aucklanders who use us love us. The thing is that far less Aucklanders use Auckland libraries than we would like, and we want to change that by getting in the face of non-customers and helping them understand the things that we do, the resources that we have, and the things that they can access for free, essentially, for living in Tāmaki Makaurau. So that's the advantage that going to these events gives us, as well as providing some entertainment on the day. It helps us get new library members, and it helps us engage with people and families that might not otherwise come across an Auckland library. And the cool thing is the 2 new vehicles that are coming, so rather than replacing the big old tired central bus with the same thing, we've got 2 new vehicles coming for the same price, essentially, which are more like kind of camper vans, and they'll be able to reach a number of places that we can't get to now with the big buses. So I'm thinking some of our beaches and parks where taking a 20-ton mobile bus just is not practical or safe. The 2 new vehicles will be much more agile and enable us to visit a lot more places. Might even mean that we can get to places like Waiheke and Great Barrier Island.
Follow-up question. In the report, it talks about increased safety for the sole drivers. Now you will have a team of volunteers to support the driver, is that right?
No, so we're not using volunteers on the mobile library buses. What we're proposing is that at the moment they do everything on their own, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities to take, say, a library assistant from a community library could be spending time on a mobile library vehicle, so they're getting some professional development. The mobile library librarian is getting some extra support, and the customer's getting an increased service. It may also mean, so using the example of being able to spend more time at marae and Māori learning institutions, I think the marae is an awesome opportunity for us to be able to take our oral historian. So we could be taking our oral historian to marae to help people capture and share the stories of Auckland, which we can't do at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report. I noticed that a couple of the local boards weren't supportive of it, and I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more what arguments they were putting forward, just so we get their point of view.
Sure.
Thanks.
So the feedback, so there was 2 local boards who did not support the proposal, Ōrākei and Upper Harbour. So, and when I workshop with them, it wasn't that they don't support this proposal, it's that they don't believe in the mobile library service in general. So comments to the effect of we don't have any literacy issues in our local board area. People who are over 65 have got a gold card, they can get to a bus and get to the community library. So I won't share some of the other verbatim comments, but that was the kind of the general tenor. They didn't see a mobile library service as relevant in the local board area, in a nutshell.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few questions. Can I just pick up on the question that Councillor Casey asked around the safety of just the driver and getting some support? Are there regulations with regard to being on your own? I was just wondering if there were health and safety issues. Like, I get that you only need one person to drive the bus, but
yes,
just being on their own anyway, there's no kind of regulations around whether they should be on their own the whole time?
So Merla can talk to that. She's a bit more across it than me.
Yeah, Councillor Collins. We have a lone worker policy in Auckland Council, and we've been doing quite a bit of work in Council at the moment, and Dean and I are both involved in it, around safety of staff, and essentially it's a program around minimising violence. So we're very much aware of that, and we do have systems in place for our people who are on their own. And I guess we're doing a big refresh of that at the moment, so it's a timely question.
Sure. Yeah. And just 2 other questions, Chair. I was wondering if you've had any, I know you've sought the feedback from local boards, if you've had any either user feedback or just general feedback from library users or non-library users about the service.
No, I mean, we collect through, so every year at libraries, we've got a feedback mechanism set up, so it's very easy for customers to provide both qualitative and quantitative feedback. And we at libraries, we get about 100,000 pieces of qualitative feedback. We get it every day, every week. So we get that for the mobile libraries, and we get that for every community library as well, and the managers in those places make adjustments to the service based on that feedback at a local level. So we get that for each mobile library vehicle as well. Oh, okay. In terms of the proposal, I've been pretty careful to really keep this at the stage to local boards and to governing body. We didn't want to, we've been socialising some potential changes with customers, but it was important to recognise that ultimately it's this committee that decides on whether changes happen or they don't. So am I expecting that we will have a few annoyed customers? Yes, I am. Those customers where it's very convenient for them just to hop on outside their house. Can I hand on heart say that overall for Auckland it is going to be much better, because we will be visiting children and visiting isolated communities that don't get service currently, then I think that is part of the trade-off that this committee needs to consider when making a decision.
Thanks. And just finally, I noticed in the report, and I think you've picked up on some really good things around people who are housebound, Māori, older persons, and then there's a bit there around those who have low literacy and your desire to lift literacy. I don't see anything in particular advance towards specific communities, and we know that in education the lowest performing kids in our schooling system are Māori and Pacific, so I'm wondering how you plan to address that. Granted, I already know that there's great programs happening at Tupu, Otara, Mangere East, so I know what's happening in the libraries. I'm just wondering how this service will supplement what's going on around your literacy desire to lift it.
Sure, so my apologies, I wasn't very explicit about that in the report. So one of the things that, one of the big shifts that we're seeing, because we're going to be stopping a lot of, or proposing to stop a number of those residential stops in parts of Auckland that are very well serviced and very well connected through the internet and a whole bunch of other things. We're proposing to shift a lot of that resources to places like Otahu, to Manukau, to be, and particularly targeting early childhood centres and low decile schools. And Joe, who's my manager, who's responsible for the operation of that service, has already got a lot of irons in the fire ready to go. So we're really excited about the impact that we can make, particularly around young Pacifica and young Māori.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just to let people know, we've got Councillor Cooper, Newman, Walker Hills and Simpson. There's nothing like libraries to really stir everybody up, but we have got quite a large agenda, so hopefully we will have addressed all the questions by the time we get to Councillor Simpson.
I'll try and keep my answers shorter.
Councillor Cooper. You might just need to, sorry, Councillor.
It's right. We've swapped them from somewhere else. In terms of, I was just wondering with the Ōrākei Local Board, did they made these comments, did they not know that they had the Ōrākei Marae and Papakainga in their local board area? It's just interesting. My other question is, around the community, we have a lot of volunteer community libraries. I mean, in Councillor Halsamai, where we've got Te Atatu South and Piha Waitarua, and I know that Piha gets a library grant. Is this another way of giving them a bit of professional support and ideas? You know, because, and I'm sure Councillor Sayers is happy too, because when you have big rural areas, often it's just community libraries. Is that another way of just supporting them, or having events at their libraries, things like that? You know, if it's, would you envisage anything like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I forgot to mention that one of the new roles is a rural librarian. Right. So we know that in Franklin and Waitakere Ranges and Rodney in particular, there's a number of rural libraries that are operated with various degrees of expertise and hours across the week. So the rural librarian's role is to support those staff, those volunteers, and be able to be a bit more professional with those rural libraries, the ones that really want the support. There's some that have made it clear, look, we're happy just doing what we're doing, just leave us to our own devices. We've got others that are really appreciative of some increased support, and we're also doing things like introducing, once again, for those rural volunteer libraries that want it, is introducing Wi-Fi to those libraries which haven't got them before, and this is also responding to growth in new areas as well, growth areas where we're, you know, there's.
Well, Hobsonville Point's a case in point where there's a huge sort of proliferation of older adult communities now, and a lot of them can't get in the car, you know, so that would be really great.
So thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All seems quite a good thing. The question that I had is, what is the selection criteria for volunteers who work within this particular service?
First of all, we have members of the public approach us wanting to volunteer. So I've been involved with hospice for well over a decade, and a part of hospice's success has been to be able to recruit and nurture and provide meaningful opportunities for those thousands of volunteers. And at libraries, it's the same thing. It's finding the types of activities that keep volunteers interested. At the end of the day, volunteers, from a council's perspective, are regarded in many ways like employees. They need to be vetted to make sure that we're not, you know, sending inappropriate people or people who shouldn't be out to visit our customers. They have health and safety training. So it's usually people who want to want to be volunteers and have a particular interest. We have a really good volunteer framework that addresses a number of those things.
Will the mobile library service under the change model, will you be able to ensure that there is at least a trained librarian as part of the team, and that we're not just fully moving away from professional librarians to all volunteers?
Yep. So I just need to be really clear that we're not proposing to use volunteers for any baseline library services. We're not using volunteers to do the work of library staff.
Okay.
So if we didn't have volunteers, we could not do this housebound service. So
Okay.
this is not technical work. This is work that's spasmodic, that needs people to have their own vehicles. It's a bit like Meals on Wheels. You know, if Meals on Wheels didn't have their volunteers, meals wouldn't get delivered. And if we haven't got housebound volunteers, then books and human contact won't be delivered either, unfortunately.
And just one other question, so that the training that you talked about for the volunteers, is that training which is maybe foundational training to assist with their diplomas in library and information systems, that level 5 course? Because I think that's the entry course or something.
No, we're talking about very basic. This is how you treat customers. These are our health and safety rules. So I'm talking about very, very basic training. They're not really receiving any training that would get them to become a librarian. We're talking about just very basic health and safety, customer care type of training.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I've just got a question around the way that you interact with communities or customers. Would it be fair to say that when you go out and you're going to a particular community, and that might be one that's more interested in Te Reo as compared to some seniors and the like, that you customise the books and the like for that trip? Is that a fair?
That's very fair. And in fact, the 2 new vehicles, I mean, I don't know who in the room here remembers Thunderbirds, but like Thunderbird 2 had could like pick up different containers and drop them off where needed. And so these new vehicles have been designed to be able to go to a library. We take the bins of books that might be specific to a Māori collection, and in place we might take some large print of romance and westerns or something.
Right.
I'm not being disparaging, but westerns and romance are very popular in the retirement villages in large print.
So you can plug stuff in and out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Can we have a chance to see one of these?
We'll make sure that when the 2 new vehicles arrive, that there's an appropriate opportunity to do that.
Stunning.
I love Councillor Wayne Walker pricked his ears up when it came to romance and westerns.
Well, that's
we know your favourites now, Wayne. It's good to know.
Sure, but
we'd love the library staff to decide what they would pick each of us as having. That would be a very interesting exercise. Councillor Hills.
Thank you very much. I think there's been enough questions. So just separately, I'd like to have a kōrero around the work with Rangatahi and Tamariki, just separately, so just really supportive, so thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora, thank you for your presentation. One of the suburbs in the Ōrākei ward is Ellerslie, and they've requested a library, which we haven't been able to fund. So can you assure me that the mobile library service will be retained in the Ōrākei local board area?
I can, yes.
Thank you. My second question is, when or how often will the evaluation of the new changes come back to us?
Yeah, so this first change obviously is a big one for us, and I think we're going to need to give it at least probably 9 to 12 months to bed in. So I would suggest that we report back in 12 months' time, and then when we report back, that would be a good time to perhaps consider the ongoing review process, what that might look like, and over what sort of time frame that might take part. But I think if we come back after a 6-month review, we really haven't left, or even 9 months, I don't really think we will have given it enough time. I know how hard the team has been working to engage with schools, and that everyone wants to engage with schools. We think that we can make a real difference, and the schools agree with us, but it's quite a process to go through to connect with the principals, to connect with the staff. We've done a trial out west where we've got several thousand new young customers. And to do that means a whole lot of paperwork and data entry for each customer, each new young customer. So my suggestion would be 12 months, and then let's look at a...
So on that, Madam Chair, if I may, I think also the evaluation of the Te Reo speaking work would be good, because it's slightly different to what we've done before, so it's great. And my final question is, look, our ward's also very good at volunteering, so when you do the marketing for volunteers to assist, can you please send it around the councillors so that we can send that out to our networks?
Great, that'd be great, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. That's all.
Move the recommendation, and I'm actually adding a B to acknowledge our library staff for their commitment to providing services to all of Auckland. I think it's time to acknowledge these extraordinary people. Councillor Casey, you'd like to second? I think everything we've asked for, everything we've talked about, everything we've required of you is being delivered above and beyond, and I thank your staff. I acknowledge the services, and I know for our community who are starved of opportunities to engage in the world of books and learning, you're actually going to go in and fill those gaps, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, oh, sorry. Councillor Darby, I do apologise. I didn't see a recommendation here. I think we've covered it. Humble apologies. It's enough to concentrate on sharing and driving the microphone. That's just now exceeded my abilities. Moving back to the agenda and item 8, Te Kiti Rukuruku and the Māori naming of parks and places. Jane, welcome, and team. Kia ora and welcome. We're in your hands.
Ai te mea tutahi māku e pihine ra ki tō tātou matunu i te rangi ko ia te timatanga me te hakamutunga tanga mea tato. E te rangatira e Alfe mihi aka nei ra kia koe tō mihi ake kia tātou. Taino atu ki tā tātou matunu i te rangi. Mai ki tā tātou koromatua, ki te kauni hera, te pōari. Mai ki a tātou e hui hui mai nei, kei raro te tūni o tēnei whare o tātou. E mihi aroha ki tā tātou Councillor Linda e pāna tana kōrero ki tōna hoa i haere ake ki tū o te aira. Te mihi aka nei rā ki a rātou, ko haere rātou ki te pō uri uri ki te pō tangopango. Nā reira koutou, haere. Nā reira huri noa ki a tātou e hui hui mai nei. E te rangatire e au te nākoe. Te mihi ake ki te wiki o te reo, i tēnei wā. E tautoko ake ki tā tātou rangatira hoki e a renata e pāna tō mihi ake. Nā kia tātou e hui mai nei. Nā reire te koromatua. E mihi nei rā kia koe, Councillor Penny. E tō tūnga ki te moake ki te mana. Kei konei tā mātou hoa, he awhi kia mātou te kaupapa o te kete rukuruku no o rākei hoki he mea he kai representative mo te runanga o Ngāti Whātua. Taino atu ki tā tātou hoa no Taranaki, engari tōna nohonga i reira, engari hei awhi ki a mātou nei nā ki tā tātou tūhene kei kō, nā koe e tēnā. Nā reire te whānau koutou rā, tēnā koutou. A tēnā koutou huri no ki te whare, kia ora mai anō rā tātou katoa. Madam Chair, may I please convey and to acknowledge Alf for the wonderful acknowledgements in terms of our attendance here at this hui. And those who have assembled here to listen to the addresses of issues, and certainly we have a very good one called Te Kete Rukuruku. And we have members who are present, and Jane Atkins, who's my manager, will be addressing this kaupapa and introduce some of our members. But Madam Chair, I just want to say this. Can everyone say o? Ra. Kei. Ora kei. Can you say o? Ra. Kei. Madam Chair, that is the word for Te Wiki of Te Reo. Nā reira, tēnā koutou. Puri noa ki te whare, kia ora mai tātou.
Ngā mihi, Richard, mo te mihi, mo te kumiti o te taiao hapori hoki. He mihi ana ki ngā rangatira, ngā kumiti mema, he mihi ana te koromatua, he mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua, Ngātai, ki Tāmaki, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, Tururanga o Ngāti Whātua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. He mihi ki te kaupapa o tēnei wiki, te wiki o te reo. Tēnā koe. Ko Jane Aiken taku ingoa, ko Paiorangi te wakataranga whenua, ko te ingoa te mahi i tēnei mahi te konihira. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak to this item this morning. I think I've had an opportunity to address most of you, but my name is Jane Aiken, and I'm responsible for the area of co-governance and Māori responsiveness embedded within the Parks, Sport and Recreation Department. I bring apologies from my manager, Mace Ward, for this morning. Acknowledge, as Matua Richard kindly did, Alf, in your address this morning, ngā mihi. Acknowledge Richard for his mihi and acknowledgement of Te Wiki o Te Reo. And as Richard did, also acknowledging my support network, of which is only a small part of a big program here. So to my left, acknowledging Claire Hall, who has played a major leadership role in part of this kaupapa on Te Kete Rukuruku. And as has already been acknowledged, Ngaio Kemp, thanks for joining us. Ngaio is one of the project team members from Mana Whenua. So, Madam Chair, we do have a presentation this morning to take you through the item. I understand that may have been distributed or could be distributed if you haven't already got that. And essentially intend to take you through the what, why, who and how, very briefly, to extract the high-level elements from the report. So Te Kete Rukuruku, as this front slide shows, is really two kaupapa coming together. The first is around Mana Whenua storytelling, and the second is around naming of parks and places and the Mana Whenua role in the tautoko of that. To acknowledge the name Te Kete Rukuruku, which has been gifted to this kaupapa. The words are quite extensive on the screen, and as you've been handed this out, I'll leave you to read that in your own time, but I think the sort of closing statement is quite important. Really the metaphor or the idea behind Te Kete Rukuruku is the wish on Mana Whenua's behalf to nourish new generations through the seeds of treasured story and storytelling. And that storytelling is also done through the naming of parks and places. Today we're largely addressing that portion of the program that relates to the naming of parks and places, so just talking to that project scope, or that part of the project scope. It is about the naming, renaming or dual naming for parks and places. There's obviously an opportunity in there to increase the visibility of Te Reo, and obviously a lovely opportunity to be able to talk to this kaupapa on Te Wiki o Te Reo. Inherently, that will enable us to share the rich stories and Māori histories and values with our wider community. The project is also, or the program is already playing a great role in strengthening Te Kaunihira's relationship with Mana Whenua, and the intent is to continue to do that. So the scope for the Māori naming piece has been developed in partnership with Mana Whenua over quite a number of hui, so about 20 odd hui, that have led us to the point we have today of a process that there is a level of confidence, and we've ironed out, if you like, some of the wrinkles along the way. And it definitely responds to mana whenua's experience of the current practice of naming, which in general terms has been described as inconsistent, not always respectful, and often too late. When talking to this kaupapa, especially with our local boards, but with actually a large range of people, we found it very helpful to go through the why. So just, if you'll indulge me for a few minutes and just sort of go through these few slides, which hopefully are very familiar to you. We're starting from the basis that we understand and know that the landscape of Tāmaki Makaurau was rich in Māori names prior to colonialisation, so there is an inherent base of Māori namings throughout Tāmaki Makaurau. There's a very extensive history that obviously canvassed the 100 years prior, but with the change in population, the banning of te reo Māori and the punishment around that banning of te reo Māori, the shift in urbanisation, the mass land sales and confiscations, collectively, as you're all very familiar, this has led to the loss of Māori names for a large part of Tāmaki Makaurau. The great opportunity that I know you'll be familiar with is that with really since 1985, but really only in the last few decades, we've seen a real resurgence and a turnaround, and there's a number of platforms that exist which this program can sit upon, if you like. So one is the very important adoption of the Māori language policy in 2016, a significant move and something that has been really applauded widely whenever I've been talking about this kaupapa. That's mirrored with government agencies all having similar policies and rolling out bilingual signage. We've seen some really bold moves in other cities and towns around Aotearoa, so this is not necessarily a first, but it is early following in the footsteps of other places. And at this very point in time, based on a very high-level macro analysis of 4,130 parks and places we have around the region that are under the control of Auckland Council, including local boards, there is 9% Māori place names and park names. This program represents an opportunity to significantly increase that. We also look in terms of the why to this being an international movement, so we've got a number of examples around the world where Indigenous languages have been celebrated and brought back to the fore, and examples too where that is almost wholly rolled out in bilingual signage around countries and townships. Mentioned before the Māori language policy, but it's been very helpful in taking this back around the local boards to just highlight some elements of that policy to keep the key components omnipresent or at the forefront of our discussion. So those 4 outcome areas are very powerful parts of the policy that we can help deliver on. So to keep the te reo visible, heard, spoken and learnt can certainly be delivered through this program. Ultimately, proclaiming or identifying a number of or a significant increase in Māori place names, park names, will contribute significantly to Auckland's Māori identity, being its point of difference in the world. So that's the why. In terms of the who, the tautoko that is existing already and the way in which we've been able to evolve this program thus far, we have support from mana whenua. We have support in the form of projects and funding from 11 local boards. And we have an across-council and across-CCO project team in place. In terms of the what, or probably the how, should I say, there's a significant amount of work in the process and the way in which we'll go about identifying Māori names. That is the more important piece, but what a lot of the questions often come up is how will this look at the end of the day? So this program is not in the first instance about signage. However, that signage is one of the ways in which the Māori names can be celebrated. So this is just an illustrative slide that helps us understand that we have a large percentage of monolingual English names present throughout Tāmaki Makaurau at the moment, acknowledging our library colleagues who have been doing a wonderful job of Māori naming of the libraries, and that's the second example. in some ways, the Māori naming of some of our libraries has been more akin to a translation. With working through this over a number of months, we have got the agreement that the appropriate way to go forward with community parks and places is dual naming. And the third example of Taurarua, Judges Bay, is an example of dual naming, where both names have unique identities, unique stories. They're not trying to translate each other, they stand alone. That is also acknowledging the Māori language policy, with the Māori name being shown first. There is a moemoia, an opportunity, a dream that there could be some locations where monolingual Māori would also be possible, both with the name and potentially even with the component parts of the sign, but that's just an illustrative example. Madam Chair, that's all I wanted to bring from the report in terms of highlighting the key elements of this relatively large program, and happy to take questions.
Thank you. Now, I know there'll be questions, so let's make sure that we deal with questions first, and then we'll go on to the discussion. Councillor Newman.
Yes, thank you. What I wanted to, a couple of questions actually about how this is all funded. So in your report, because we've been asked to make a decision in principle for a regional approach, but in terms of the financial implications, we're not contributing to that. Why not?
Very good question. So through the Chair, as I was highlighted in the report, we will be coming back next year with a more detailed breakdown of how the implementation could look for regional parks and cemeteries, and that may include a bit more detail on the financial aspect of that. At the moment, until we plan that out and understand a little bit more about the costs associated with it, I'm not able to give you a sort of dollar figure today. There is, at the moment, a regional fund for the wider storytelling program, and that is funding the kind of general aspects of the program, including project management and things like help, internal resources and support for database development. What the local boards have been asked to contribute to, because they are in the first phase of the program of Māori naming, is the resourcing required to support mana whenua to go away and do the research and make the decisions. So they're, at this very point in time, are being asked to fund the research and the development of the stories behind the naming. That is not happening for this committee until next year.
Do you have $25,000 to do that? Because I want to support it. I think it's a great idea. I think we should be doing this as a regional approach, and I think if we come up with a regional program, we should fund it regionally rather than set a regional program and then ask local boards to pay the cost of the work around that. So do you have the budget?
So through the Chair, the first part of the question, do I have the budget? So the local boards that are identified in this report, the 11 local boards, have all put forward funding. So we have budget to progress with those local boards. The regional budget is also in place for the program management. The budget required in next financial year for the regional parks and the cemeteries, we are yet to quantify, and we'll be coming back to you on that.
Okay, and can you give me an assurance that, so I've looked at your calculations, so 9% of the 404,130, that's 371 parks potentially with signage. If we're, for example, to go to, say, 30%, that's 1,239, for which we might do dual and monolingual Māori. So that needs to be funded regionally. We're going to be funding that regionally because local boards won't have that budget.
So once again, through the Chair, very good question. I should have highlighted more clearly that the program is largely about the creation of the identification of the names and the stories to go with it. It is not a capital development project. So we're very clearly identifying with local boards as we're going through this that the capital development is something that will need to be delivered following this program. In all cases, local boards have a reasonable number of renewal projects on their books, and so we are very clear that a lot of these names will be able to be delivered in signage through renewals over time.
No, that's if the local boards decide that. That's not if we decide that. That's not for us to determine.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koutou and tēnā koe, Jane. Look, so Te Kete Rukuruku, that's the program around telling unique stories. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
And a subset of the Māori language policy is naming of parks and places that are not regional. For example, parks in a local board area. Do the local board, who has, I don't like the word jurisdiction, but who has delegation for the naming of parks in local board areas, as in local parks?
Through the Chair, the local boards have that delegation, and just highlighting that paragraphs 16, 17 and 18 of the report talk to where the various decision-making accountabilities sit.
Okay. And so recommendation, and just the last question through you, Chair, the recommendation too is really for us and the delegation that we have in this committee is around regional parks and cemeteries.
That's correct.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor. I think that's really important. Member Blair.
Oh, kia ora. Me mihi atu ki a koe rā e Richard, tō mihi. Mai ki a mātou, pāna ki te whakanui te reo, me te maumaharatanga taua nā kuia ko haere te pō. Hai, me mihi atu ki a koe rā hei whakapua wai tēnā reo I rungi a tātou a tēnei ata tāhua. Nō reira, hai, tika ana ko ō rākai te kupu. Nā tāne a tāhu I rungi tēnā pukutapu me tā tātou nei puti noho ki tērā taha no te kanihira o no rākai. Me mihi atu ki a koe. Just saying that in particular the men from Ōrākei are particularly handsome, and also our local councillor sits over here from Ōrākei were referred to as a beautiful flower. So puti is another kupu for today, which is flower. Just a few questions, if I may. Just asking how mana whenua are going to be resourced and supported through this?
Good question through the Chair. There is an acknowledgement that the scale of the program is significant, and the precise sort of cost of resourcing mana whenua to be able to undertake the scale of the job is difficult to predict. However, we've been very transparent on the idea of resourcing mana whenua for bodies of work, and we are working in partnership to continue to fine-tune how we can ensure that resourcing is appropriate.
Okay, and in terms of, on paragraph 25, refers to best practice. Who's part of the crediting this is best practice? Do you have a process for that?
Through the Chair, for the last year or so, we've been developing a number of processes, and I acknowledge Claire to my left, who's worked across the country in this kind of kaupapa. So we are, at this moment, working off anecdotal evidence of what's happening around the country and what the practices are, both nationally and internationally in this regard. But we will increasingly be able to document and test that. At the moment, there isn't a third party, if you like, qualifying that best practice statement.
Okay, and I just wanted to support Councillor Newman in terms of the centralised funding required would be a positive step forward for us. Especially for those, and just attached to that, for those local boards that aren't on the list of 11, do they have the power of veto even if the mana whenua wish to have signage for like in my local board, where if the mana whenua wanted to have the name of a park changed, would the Ōrākei local board have the power of veto of that?
Through the Chair, the Ōrākei local board have the accountability for making the decision around the name.
So what would be the best step forward? Would it be to encourage a relationship agreement between the local board and their mana whenua?
Through the Chair, we believe there's a number of steps that could be taken, and one of those that we are very firmly basing the progress of this program on is building success within the local boards that we're already partnering with. This is a massive program, and there's a level of need to pace that program in order to make sure that we are able to successfully deliver. It has a lot of resource required from mana whenua as well as from council. So we think through success we'll build success, but yes, relationship agreements and other opportunities to partner would potentially support that.
Okay, thank you. And just through the Chair, thank you for this. It's a great timing for Te Wiki o Te Reo. Our only unique, one of our only unique distinctions around the world is our reo. It's from here and spoken. Having it on signage would allow us to leverage and showcase our city as the great city that it is of Tāmaki Makaurau. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Next is Puti Puti Orake, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, my question is, and I did have the financial question, which has been answered, and I did have the how good is this if the local boards don't want to do it question as well. But my final question that I had was around the dual naming and the storytelling. For me, I look at the historic signage, the template that is used. When I was chair of the Ōrākei local board, we put up we named a bay, Biddix Bay, and we told the story of how it was called Biddix Bay, all right? Now my problem is naming the example that you've got on your final slide, Judges Bay. You've got a Māori name and the Judges Bay, but you haven't said how it got that. So for me, just forgive me if I use my wrong words, for me just adding a Māori name, which may not be a translation, how would you know if it was a translation or not, just alongside an existing English name, is only half a step to what we were trying to do. Surely we should have a complementary sign somewhere else that actually talks about the story, about how that Māori name came to be chosen and why, potentially, and why the English name got to be chosen and why. For me, just having a name that no one potentially would understand why it was there, if it's not a translation, is only doing it half a job. So could you give me some clarity about how we could expand it and do something to support that?
Tautoko te kōrero, absolutely, that is at the heart of what we are endeavouring to transform through this program. So acknowledging that we haven't necessarily had all the tools in place to be able to not just create the Māori names or reinstate the Māori names, but it's the stories that have been identified time and time again as the rich part of this program. So we are working with our various experts within libraries and with digital. We're working with ATEED, and we're exploring all sorts of opportunities for how we can tell those stories. We know putting stories on signs is not an effective way of getting stories across. We do have some good guidance about how we can sort of put some teasers, if you like, a little hint of what the story might be through our websites, GIS, and on our signs. But it is about having complementary tools. I mean, obviously apps are very popular today, and we've got several apps that we're looking at as an option, but also, you know, other sorts of cloud-based, web-based information. Ultimately, particularly through the broader Te Ki Te Rukuruku program, the option of this being the cultural infiltration, if you like, of these stories includes through events, through tourism, through education and curricula, etc. So we're keeping a very open mind and exploring a range of options about how we can ensure the stories are not only shared to a little extent on signage, but much more extensively than that.
Great, thank you.
Good question. Thank you, Councillor. And that just reminding us that this is part of a long journey, and you know, starting with the signage is a good start. And I know for areas that have been renamed, I know out west we renamed this sort of Don Massey Park to Te Rangihiroa, which was an opportunity to really get schools and kids and everyone understanding the story of Te Rangihiroa, Don Buck's camp, the Tarara connections with the Croatian, the Māori community. It sort of started a whole amount of energy for that park that wasn't there simply through the renaming or dual naming. Same with Orangahina, Harbour View. It's used comfortably, but we do need the opportunities for people to understand the story. I've got Councillor Walker, Councillor Hills, and hopefully we've covered everybody, and Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Walker.
Wayne Walker. Just got a question around the context of how you're going about the historical aspect, and that's around the relationship of the place and the name of the place with the history of the place, and the opportunity to engage with libraries and heritage to conceivably capture some oral history at the same time, given that you're doing this piece of work. and that would be incredibly valuable. So I just put that out there.
That's a great question, and through the chair, I'd also invite in a moment Claire to partially answer that question as one of our leading oral historians in Aotearoa. The first part of your question is that we have a wonderful level of support from our libraries team. You acknowledged them in the earlier item, and I need to acknowledge too the wonderful work they do and they have done to support this project. All of the reports and discussions with local boards start with a reasonably desktop level of research from the libraries team just because of the sheer scale of what we're talking about, but then they've willingly gone into much more in-depth research on a number of occasions. We've also learnt in partnership with our local boards what a rich array of local historians are out there in Tāmaki, and local boards have helped guide us to some of the more sort of active local historians that have helped contribute to that history research in the first instance. But that's all been about understanding the base, understanding what the current stories are, understanding what the current names are about. And I'll ask Claire briefly to speak to the question really about gathering the oral stories as we go.
I te tuatahi, nei rā aku mihi, mahana ki a koutou katoa, I tēnei wiki waki hirihira. Tautoko i ngā mihi kua mihia ki a koutou, ki a tātou. Aira, ko Claire Hall tēnei. Kia raro. Kia ora whānau. I just wanted to support the mihi and acknowledgements this morning for Te Wiki o Te Reo, and thank you all for the excellent questions that are coming through for this kaupapa. So through the chair, thank you for your question. I think it's a really pertinent one. What it does is it really highlights the reality that we're dealing with a lot of intangible cultural heritage, a lot of mātauranga Māori in this kaupapa. And I come to this as an oral historian, so it was lovely for me to hear your question. In terms of the storytelling, it is mana whenua led, so we are relying on traditional knowledge holders, tribal historians to come in a partnership way. And I think probably the distinction that's worth making is we're running quite a different oral history model that is used at the moment by libraries, but it is the pūtakitanga or the foundation of the way that we work. So you've mentioned local historians, the already very rich collections that are within the library and the heritage collections, and they are certainly on our agenda. The primary focus for this point in the project is developing the relationships with the traditional knowledge holders, tribal knowledge holders, other local historians, and really letting them set the agenda for the way that the storytelling is going to happen. So we've done a fair bit of piloting around that to see how it will work, and a really big part of my work has been putting in place traditional knowledge protections, so that the process that we're involved in, we're talking at the moment about story, and I think that's the very end of a process which demands a lot of interactive and collaborative work around how we look after that knowledge, until it gets to a point where there's an agreement about how it can be used. So I guess that's just a little bit of background for you on the way that we are drawing on the practices that are in place, but also trying to expand on those to make this a very mātauranga focused process.
Through you, Madam Chair. So look, that's a great answer. My hope is that we would do it well, and I would just make the observation that as much and all as we're dealing with Māori place names, we probably ain't done a great piece of work around the European or whatever the other place names are in terms of their substantiation. So maybe that's an issue for another day.
Madam Chair, if I may just note though, if it was a sort of supplementary question, we are in fact gathering a lot of history in one place about the current names through this program, so it has got the added benefit of getting greater knowledge and awareness of the existing English names.
Thank you.
That's a very good point. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again for this. This is not controversial at all, or this should be what we're doing. I think that there are things we could be doing to make this easier for local boards, though. So when I was on Kaipātiki local board, we changed, we obviously had a few parks that we changed, and the new park, O Pakitai, down in Beach Haven, that brought that name back, and Kaimatara o Waimanawa, which was given to us by Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and we're obviously using Te Oniwa Pā as its rightful name in Stokes Point area now. That was not controversial, there was no big deal about it, but sometimes the pathways weren't clear on how we could engage early, and how local boards, if they do want to bed in this work and do it more often, so I assume this is what this is, which is fantastic. But I do have some concerns around local boards who say no, or don't want to, or can't fund some of this work, because I would hate to think that some of our the Māori living in Auckland feel whakamā about this process because of the obvious leaders in their community not wanting to pick this up, or are unable to pick this up. So there must be some way that, yes, there's delegations around changing names, but surely we can still tell those stories somehow. And if it is a web-based or through the Auckland Council website, that we're just able to bring those in, and it's probably around a regional fund if it's not a local board. But I think there's some, as a council, regardless of the local board view, that we stand up, and this is one of our 3 official languages. It's our Indigenous language. We shouldn't be really allowing that to be missed in certain communities in our city. So I would have real concerns that we create different classes for the access to Māori and our stories. Yeah, especially on a week like this. So I have some uncomfortableness around the fact that we may not be doing this across the whole of Auckland, and some of our local Māori are missing out. So, and not just local Māori, the rest, everyone in this community shouldn't be having different versions. So I get it around the naming, but I think if there's opportunities to include Te Reo on signage, I assume libraries and everything as their regional kind of bodies will continue that right across. But if you have some ideas around how we can ensure that's across, but also around, I don't think this is a big deal. Our rangatahi and everyone going through school right now, this is not an abnormal thing or anything that we should be really debating. But this is fantastic, but I just want to make sure that it's consistent.
So through the chair, if I take what I thought was the seed of the questions, and there is that what could we do to assist the local boards to ensure it's adopted across the region? I think the funding is a little bit of an obstacle for some boards. We haven't had sort of as clear and outright no as was articulated in your earlier item. So okay. I think, I hold a great promise that this will eventually roll out, and it is about just timing, and it is about resourcing. I perhaps suggest that when we come back to you in 2019 would be a great opportunity to revisit that question, because we will have had a lot more time to develop the program. We would have hopefully had those successes under our belt, and we would understand a little bit more about what that resourcing challenge is for the scale of the program that we're talking about. I think the second seed of a question I got there was around the comment around the fact that it shouldn't be hard, it shouldn't be anything that's controversial. I talk with that comment. I do think that is potentially a nervousness in some areas about how communities will receive this. So that is a real nervousness. It hasn't at this point in time held up the program. Obviously we've got great support from 11 local boards, but it is potentially one of the other questions that are sitting in the back of some local board minds.
There's always going to be a little bit of raru around, some of these discussions as soon as we raise it. Councillor Hills?
And just one last question, thank you, Madam Chair. Although I semi-agree with the sentiment from Councillor Simpson around signage and maybe in significant sites or major parks, but I think some more thinking needs to be done around, is it just a sign you can get the app or whatever, because I think the cost will rise considerably if we have signage at every park or place name we want to change, and that may be another
let's make that
barrier.
Stage 2.
It's explanation.
Okay, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. To a degree, my question has been answered by Jane already. And by the way, congratulations on a really excellent report. So interpretation will be stage 2. That was going to be a question. And if I may shamelessly hijack the meeting on something that is dear to my heart, there was earlier this year, I think it was in March or so, there was a lengthy article by Simon Wilson on Britomart and Mount Eden Station. I'm not as interested on the comments that were made around the Mount Eden Station, but Britomart, which referred to the first rail station at being Point Britomart, was a long and challenging process, and there was actually it was a very great desire to change the name of Britomart going back 15 years or so. And I would just urge you, in terms of any work that's being undertaken, and I don't know whether you're working with Auckland Transport or not, for the retention of the name Britomart. I'm very happy for as much interpretation that needs to be made, but that's something I just put in a personal request that consideration be given to that. Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm just wanting to, be transparent and mindful of any possible perceptions. So I seek your guidance as to whether I have a conflict of interest, given I think my sister-in-law has been contracted to work on this work. So if that's the case, then I'll abstain from the vote on it. Thank you.
I think it's one of those that you have no direct pecuniary interest, Councillor, and it's good, transparent, openness, telling us of that connection. My personal view is that, it's not a conflict, but if you would like to and feel more comfortable, the decision is entirely yours. If you wish to abstain, then please do feel free to do so. No other questions or comments? I think we've probably covered that fully. We'll move to the recommendations. Councillor Filipaina.
Just comments?
Yeah, well, we've had sort of a mixture of comments and questions. I am also aware that we've got quite a large agenda still to get through, so I'll go to Councillor Filipaina and Councillor Mike Lee.
It'll only take 30 seconds, Chair.
You are more than welcome, Councillor.
So look, for me, win-win situation. I want to acknowledge the local boards, those that have come on board in regards to this program. I want to acknowledge them because they're willing to put money behind their decision. So I want to acknowledge them. I also, again, and it's been done just to me, to you all in regards to this work. The jewel is awesome. And the reason I say that is because I guarantee when people see the names, they will generate comment in regards to, well, what is that Māori name? What is the whakapapa to that? So, as one of the youngest councillors around this table, at 59, can I just ask, and or not ask, but around those little, I don't know what they're called, man, I'm just too old, but you put your phone on the app and it...
QR codes.
Who?
QR codes.
Yeah, that one. I think, this is where we could end up utilising what's available to give that whakapapa to it, because that was done. So, thank you, Chair. This is why I've seconded the recommendation after Matua Blair. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Filipaina. You young things and your newfangled ideas. Councillor Lee.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Ngā mihi mahana mō te wiki o te reo Māori. Madam Chair, members, I just want to point out a number of concerns I have with this program. They may not be valid, but I want to raise them. I note that regional parks are explicitly mentioned in the recommendation and throughout the report. And I just want to point out to members that nearly 90% of our regional parks have Māori names, and those names were given or formalised by Auckland Regional Pākehā by and large, without much thought, really. they just were appropriate names and the best names to bestow. There are some names that are not Māori, and usually, just about in all cases, but perhaps not in all cases, there were particular reasons for those names, and they usually related to the difficult process of buying regional parks, because buying regional parks was sometimes fraught in the past, and sometimes those names were a condition of purchase. There's one non-English name and one non-Maori name, and that is a Swedish name, and that is Wenderholm Regional Park, and that is there for a particular reason relating to the Caldry family. It's where Queen Elizabeth stayed during her visit in 1953 and so on. So that's a particular reason for that name. Another interesting name is Archu Creek, which is a hybrid Maori English name, and that name was given at the request of the family, the Chatlanar family, who gave it. Their enormous sheep and cattle station, they gave it to the people of New Zealand with the request that it not be named after them, but it be named Archu Creek, which is a kind of a traditional hybrid name for that area. So that's where we are with regional parks. I recall there was some difficulty in the naming of one particular park. Mr. Brown will recall that, where I recommended that the name be called Umupuia at the request of the late Mrs. Nyungu Zisler. But unfortunately, as it turned out for me and the people who supported that name, the local people felt that the Duda, the pioneering Duda family, should be recognised, and democracy having its way, that name was changed to Duda. It was a sensitive matter. However, I mention that to point out that most of these names are completely non-controversial, whether they are Māori or English or even Swedish. However, sometimes they can be controversial and touch on very almost raw feelings in the community. So I sound that as a note of caution. All of these parks are public parks, and therefore if you're going to change the names, you have to recognise that some of them have been around a very long time indeed, and people have close associations with their parks. We know that's why they're popular. You could even say people love their parks. So you have to be careful about historic associations and names and the wider cultural heritage. And I'm talking about, I know this is Māori Language Week, but we also have to recognise there is a majority Pākehā cultural heritage to be mindful of. It doesn't often get said in here, but I think sometimes we need to say it. Public parks are so important that Parliament has deemed it fit to pass legislation governing the management of those parks. So most of these parks are not really up to us to do what we want. They're considered so important that we have the Reserves Act 1977 and the Auckland Domain Act 1987, and of course the Local Government Act 2004. So we have to be mindful that it's not just up to us or even the local boards, but there is a process that in managing parks that we need to take into account. But finally, I'd just like to say, Madam Chair, if the intent seems to be related to the renaissance of the Maori language, te reo Māori. You have to bear in mind that language is a two-way street, utu, back and forward, not just one talking at another. So it's very, very important if you're going to change names, particularly old names. Not a big deal, I don't think, with new names, but with old names, you need to take into account the wishes of the community, the local communities, and the regional communities. In other words, the people of Auckland. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Lee, and I think you make some good points that it is a two-way street. Naming was done at a time when Māori was probably not at the stage of consideration as it is now. So for that two-way street, it's now perhaps time for a different discussion with Māori and a more equal discussion. Member Brown.
Tēnā koe o tātou kaihautu, tēnā koutou katoa, hui anō, tautoko hea ki ngā mihi kua mihi e te ata nei, e te tuakana Alpha kōrua e te whanaunga. A Richie, tēnā kōrua, koutou katoa e ngā tuihini e hoki mai nei e tautoko te reo karangi tua. Hoi anō, ka rongo ki te kōrero kupu Māori tuatahi o tātou i tēnei wā o rā kei. He tautoko engari ka rongo ki te kupu tuaru o tātou i tēnei ata. Umu. Poia. Umu poia. I whakapiripiri mai e te reo o te moana nui a kiwa, o mātou i tēnei taha o Aotearoa hei Māori, he kotahi, he whanaungatanga o tātou ki te kupu i te ingoa o Umapuia no reira. Pāna ki te kupu i te mohio ana ko te waiwera, ko te ingoa o Umapuia, so hot water ne, no reira. Just a little comment, and I acknowledge Councillor Lee, and it was fitting that you mentioned Umupuia because you were almost taking my wind out of my spinnaker.
Never do that,
But if I heard and if I understand the initiative right, it's actually potentially an opportunity to complement, if I could say, as opposed to challenge or confront the existing. However, the pātai I have is that of the kehua, the kehua. So the kehua in this case meaning the manu I can't see, being Umupuia, located within the local board of Franklin. So my pātai is, my understanding, Franklin would have a wealth of parks, yet are in a mission in the local board sense at the moment. So pātai o kia koutou. You know, how are we going on that journey, and what is it, if anything, that the committee and our elected members can do to encourage our board, notwithstanding the challenges that they're facing, to assist and invigorate the initiative, given that the wealth of potential domain that they're the authority of, in my eyes, is a kehua insofar as a huge emission at the moment.
Kia ora, Member Brown. Through the chair, the question is similar to the one that Member Hills, or Councillor Hills raised. I think the board hasn't, as far as we're aware, said no to this kaupapa. They are simply challenged potentially by the cost and potentially by their priorities at the moment. So I think the opportunity is to reintroduce or to continue to go back to the board and invite them to participate. We do believe that we can do a better job of taking some of the boards that aren't yet part of the program through a more in-depth understanding of where the program is at, because you're right, there are a huge number of opportunities and there is a great partnership with mana whenua, particularly in the Franklin area. So the project team will be going back to the local board and representing the kaupapa and seeking them to reconsider that. What the committee can do, essentially, potentially the question around the financial barrier is one that keeps on coming up. We'll come back to you about some ideas around that, and obviously any kōrero that the committee members wish to have with the board may also be of assistance.
Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, Member Brown. I think we might be ready to put the recommendation. Councillor Casey?
I just want to congratulate Dean Kempton on getting Claire Hall on our staff. I haven't seen her for 20 years, saw her for the first time this morning. Brilliant move, absolutely brilliant.
Excellent, that's a very good addition.
One quick
Councillor
comment.
Newman. Yep.
I'm sorry.
Last comment.
Thank you. It is very important that, look, having my short time around here, probably the biggest challenge that I've seen with respect to how we move a regional policy decision with local implications that relate to signage as smoke-free. It has not been a particularly easy time. I don't want to presume that local boards are not embracing of the direction here. They might, but my presumption is that the challenge for the boards is how to resource this. So I do hope that when you report back that you can provide some options and recommendations for a regional response which is regionally endorsed, so regionally resourced, so as to complement the work of the local boards, because I'm just not comfortable with relying on a renewals program around signage and parks delivered by local boards. That will take a long, long time, because in the greater scheme of things, local boards have to do so much with limited resourcing, and renewals has been a challenge. And if you have to rely on the renewals program, I think it kind of, to me, thinks that the opportunity to really progress this in a very positive way will be diminished somewhat by the slowness of the renewals and the task of doing the work in those parks, which is wider than signage itself. So please come back with some recommendations for how you are going to resource this regionally to complement local board decision making and renewals.
Okay, so that might be thinking that this committee is the policy and strategy side of things. We can actually have a report that comes back to this in the appropriate time frame. I mean, this is going to take quite a while because there's quite a bit of discussion to have with boards. We do need to establish where are the barriers. Is it funding, or is it some boards simply don't wish to participate in the process? And at the moment we're working with the willing. I think that's the sensible way. But if we can have a slightly more fleshed out discussion on the financial implications and the financial barriers, I think that would be a good discussion to come back to us in conjunction with the Finance Committee. So we'll take that as our next steps. I'm going to put the recommendations.
But Madam Chair, could I, I'm sorry to come in at the last minute, could I ask to see reflected in the recommendations our endorsement of the importance of the local boards and the need to take into account or to include the views of the public when it comes to name changes?
Councillor, if you read the policy, that is enshrined well in the policy. However, we need to be really clear that this is a process that we're embarking on with the local boards that will be worked in partnership with local iwi and Māori. They will gift the name. This isn't a public consultation process, so we don't then go out and ask the public what they think. This is a gifting process, a respectful gifting process by Māori for that place.
This is a gift the public have to receive. Maybe that's not the best way to achieve the outcome, Madam Chair. I just think including the public is a principal thing to do on a public park.
With the greatest of respect, that hasn't necessarily resulted in a huge proliferation of Māori place names. The policy sets out clearly what the process is. You're free to vote against it, Councillor. I'm going to put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Councillor Sayers, you wish your name recorded as no?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stewart, your no as well? No other no's? Thank you. That's passed. Appreciate that. And to the team, kia ora, and thank you so much for the hard work done with this. Richard, thank you for your mihi and for the kind words at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just say, Madam Chair, that thank you for listening to our kōrero,
In line with the wiki of te reo and in line with tikanga, we would like to sing a brief waiata. Ti tiro mai ngā iwi, tātou tātou e. Tu tiro mai ngā iwi, tātou tātou e. Whai a te marangatanga, me te aroha e ngā iwi, kia kotapatahi, kia kotahira, tātou tātou e. Tātou tātou e.
Yo.
Kia ora. So just doing a quick time check where we're doing well. We've got a couple of large issues. We're aiming to break for lunch at 12:30. We'll just see whether we've got to the confidential items by then. So we'll move on to item 9, just while our team make their way forward. I just want to acknowledge we've got some AUT journalism students here today, so warm welcome. And I hope we're providing inspiration and hope. I also hope that we're encouraging you to continue your journalistic career with this kōrero and rather wonderful series of items that we're dealing with. So you're very, very welcome. Puro.
Kia ora tātou katoa, ko Parul tāku ingoa. I would also like to introduce Sophie Brookbank, who is from the waste planning team. Before we take any questions, I just wanted to make a few points. Aucklanders care deeply about the issue of plastic waste, and this came through really clearly through the waste plan and the long-term plan as well. In New Zealand, we go through an enormous amount of plastic bags, something like 750 million of them every year. So single-use plastic bags may not be the biggest source of marine pollution, but it is right up there. And putting measures for them, for their phasing out, is considered as the first step to addressing the wider issue. It is a great way to start the engagement with the community, because this is something that impacts each and every consumer. And I think we've got some great alternative options that are affordable out there. I'm not going to go into the detail in terms of the impact that the negative impacts that the bags have when they get littered, or even in our recycling collections. But I just want to highlight one point that the consultation document also makes, is that even if you discard it in your rubbish bin, it goes to a landfill. But that's not the end of it. Because it's light, it does get blown away. And quite a few of those bags end up as litter. The landfills have got screening around them, but even besides that, it might mitigate it, but it does not get rid of it completely. The other point that I want to make that is also highlighted in the document, and some of the boards have talked about it, is how would this impact consumers on lower, who are part of our lower economics and cannot afford the long life bags. The government proposes to work with the retailers to look at practical ways of bringing the community on board. We do that already. And also, if you look at some of our communities, there is really fantastic things happening. Just thinking about a couple in Titirangi and Papakura, they are adopting concepts like boomerang bags. So you use a bag, bring it back, and so you don't really need to own one. So just reflecting on the key points of our submission, so we are saying we support the proposal to a total and mandatory ban. The ban should apply to all retailers, so we're not saying it's just to the big ones, but also to the small ones as well, because an incomplete ban would be less effective. And we are saying that we support the proposed 6-month phase-out time frame. We've had a good amount of feedback received from the local boards, 13 of them, and I think we've just shared the detailed feedback with you this morning. It's been really heartening to see what they are saying. Most of them have been quite supportive. Minor concerns raised around the issue of the 6-month transition and proposals around making that longer to make sure retailers that are smaller can cope, and also just making sure communities that aren't able to buy the long life ones have some mechanisms of coping with it. So I guess, so in the submission we are encouraging the Minister to do more in this space because this is, as we see, as just a starting point. for making a difference with plastic waste. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Parole. So first of all, we'll take questions, then comments. Question, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I've just got a question around the financial implications, and I think what your work is very, very good. My question is around the plastic bags we provide as Auckland Council for, I might put this wrong, doggy doo-doo bags.
Doggy doo-doo.
What are they called?
Dog.
Dog.
Caca bags. They're called caca bags.
You know the bags I mean. They're plastic. So how are we going to phase? Are we going to phase these out? What is our attitude to those bags that we provide for dog owners?
We just have to note, Councillor, there's only a very few places where they get provided.
Yeah.
They sure as hell don't get provided in West Auckland, that's for
Well,
sure.
they do in our
It's a legacy Auckland City thing.
It is. So let's just not, before we get too carried away by kaka bags and where they are, this is a very select group of places where they're provided.
Kaka, it's a French word for poo.
Through you,
My multilingual experience is going up by the minute.
Through you, Madam Chair, this proposal only is concentrating on shopping bags. So it is bags which have handles. It is not going into any of the other packaging types that we may have. So this is not, the doggy doo-doo bags are not considered as part of the submission.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. My next question though, a lot of dog owners, you do use plastic bags though. What do you think, what are we doing about protecting the ongoing practical implications of when dog owners use a supermarket bag currently? What are we doing around education, the potential flow on around that? So what will they use?
Bread bags.
Through you, Madam Chair, as Councillor Hills just said, there are other packaging types that are quite suitable for that activity. And I am a dog owner myself, and we've got the, we actually get those, the roll of...
The dog bone
Yes,
thing.
that's right,
Yeah.
which I see a lot of people using just for that purposes. But you do have a lot of packaging in your house that you can actually use for the doggy do.
Yeah.
Just interested in
Great
that.
reuse for other kinds of packaging. We can put that on our website, clever ways that you can reuse other bits of packaging for picking up dog poo. Let's get our clever people out there thinking about that. Other questions on this? All comments. We'll move to, I'm happy to move the recommendations. If there's a seconder for that, Mayor Goff. Comments on this? We've talked about this exhaustively.
Yep.
We've had the community advocate to us. We've got people wanting to make this happen. Councillor John Walker.
Yes, Madam Chairman. I went to the supermarket last night and they've got around the plastic bag issue. What they're doing is they're issuing for 15 cents a heavy duty plastic bag now. So what I'm saying is it's quite a smart, because in the past they would have had to give the other ones away free and it would have cost them money. Now they're actually charging you for it and it meets the requirement. So what I'm saying is they haven't,
Yep.
we're very cunning.
Yep. Yep, indeed. Councillor Stewart.
I can do one better, John. I went to the New World in Howick and they actually had really heavy duty brown paper bags like we used to, our mothers and our parents and grandmothers used to use, and you had to pay 15 cents for the brown paper bag, the heavy brown paper bag if you've got. So maybe the doggy doos could go into little brown heavy duty paper bags as well.
I can see the meeting be completely subverted by discussion of doggy do. We might just call that to a halt to that. Any other non-doggy do related issues? Councillor Darby, please bring us back to the case in point.
Look, probably when I read it, I thank the staff for this report, and it's good to see that the chair and the mayor are moving and seconding this. The definition of the bag is the worrying thing for me. I don't think that definition goes wide enough. It's got to be a bag with handles. It's fine to, close down the bags at supermarkets and other retailers at the checkout, but within the store they are dispensing thousands of bags without handles. And they are equally damaging in the environment. Those soft plastics, we well know that marine species ingest. So I'm just wondering if we need to strengthen our submission and asking government to go wider in terms of its definition. I think that currently that definition is too narrow.
Okay. Can I just take some advice? I wondered if it did pick up the very fine plastic pads. Can we just make our submission pick that up? Because I agree.
Through you, Madam Chair, the proposal is very targeted towards the shopping bag side of things, where people are buying product and putting it into a bag and taking it back. And the idea there is that you have an alternative to it, so you do not need that. And I guess I think we are recommending that we can make a point that we're very keen on all packaging types and what alternatives can exist there, so that we can put that in our submission and make sure that's taken on board. But I think from what I read from the consultation document, they're seeing this as a first step in that direction.
Well, I guess I want to stress that many countries have taken these first steps and they're taking the second and third and fourth steps. And there's some urgency around this. Right. So I would urge that we strengthen it considerably. Some retailers are doing this, they're proactive and they're making the moves. Others, we know, we will have to drag them kicking. The industry will not respond. And it's only because, I mean, the industry is only responding now because it's becoming topical. It is being discussed in media and politicians are discussing it. But there are some supermarket chains, some branches are using the paper bags that the Councillor Stewart refers to in their, say, vegetable section. Other branches are not. It's just thousands of light plastic bags. So, look, I think it would be really helpful if we were a bit more ambitious here, and it is, and that's not to say it's not ambitious. I would like it to go even stronger, and
we can make that change, Councillor. I think that's a very good idea. Little life hack: if you forget your string bags, go to the mushroom section. The paper bags are in the mushroom section. Use those instead of the light, transparent plastic bags that they provide. The more of us that do that, the more people will realise that that's actually what people want, and we need to just get rid of those light, flimsy plastic bags. So Councillor Darby will pick that point up in our amendment. I've got Councillor Walker, then Margoff.
I was just wanting to speak to Chris's comment, and I just endorse that. Let's do it right. Let's do it once. And just on those bags that Chris refers to, frankly, phasing them out is even simpler because generally they're going inside another bag. So issues around strength and the like are even less significant. And for those bags, there are already direct substitutes that exist in the form of paper bags or cornstarch type bags. So they're an easy fruit to pluck off the tree.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Margoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to pick up on recommendation C, which is nominating a representative to speak to the submission. And I'd like to nominate you, Madam Chair, if you're happy to do that. Hopefully they'll bring the committee to Auckland rather than having to send you down to Wellington. But just to make a couple of very broad comments, 2 years ago in the Merrill campaign, I campaigned on eliminating plastic bags, and it was surprising the number of people said, oh, that'll be dreadfully unpopular, why are you doing that? And it shows you how quickly we've moved forward. Sometimes they say it's wrong to be right too soon. I don't think we're being right too soon. I think we've taken our time to get here, and therefore I acknowledge Councillor Darby's point. But one of the first things I did after being elected was to go to talk to Progressive and Foodstuffs, and neither of those companies were in the least bit interested in self-regulating at that point. And they told me they had some sympathy to the idea, but one of them, I think Foodstuffs, had tried it a couple of years ago, and the other company had got the edge on them, and it just wasn't possible. So in the space of 2 years, we've seen a huge change. This is really worthwhile. Of course it's worthwhile to pull out 750 million plastic bags that are going into the environment and into landfill. But we've still got a very long way to go. If you look at what is filling the stomachs of seabirds and fish, there's a range of different products. And, you know, a lot of people around this room will be wearing clothes that are synthetic, and even more people will have carpets at home that are synthetic. And that may not be a bad thing for our farming industry, Deputy Mayor, that we go back and we look at the use of natural products. But this is the first step in quite a long journey if we are to have a truly circular economy and we are to have a sustainable way of dealing with our resources. But I want to thank Parul and the team for the great job that they've done on this. I think we should be ahead of the pack and just pushing the envelope a little bit further on some of the other plastic bags. But we shouldn't be complacent at the end of this process when they've regulated against it. We're now going to have to look at a range of other products that were seen as the brave new world of the future using plastic. When the world I grew up in, paper bags actually were regarded as a perfectly acceptable way of picking up your groceries. And it will be back to the future, and we'll be looking at more sustainable ways of doing it. But very happy to not only second the motion, Madam Chair, but to move you as the spokesperson at the Select Committee to present our submission.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your leadership on this. Councillor Collins.
Just, kia ora, Chair, thanks. I just wanted to make the note, and thank you for pointing it out to 28 in the council submission, just around the challenges that poorer communities will face. When the Minister and the Prime Minister made the announcement on TV, Daryl Evans, who's from the Māngere Budgeting Centre, which also runs the one in Otara, talked about how we do better to work with poorer communities to make sure that they've got bags that they can use for their shopping. And I just wanted to remind people that we've got kids going to school out south who carry their lunches and their stationery in plastic bags, and so this is going to be quite a shift for some of these families. I note that the report says you want to work with groups that have got some funding from the Waste Minimisation Innovation Fund, and I think that's really good. They need to be key in how we educate and partner with a lot of these families that use plastic bags, not just for lining our bins, which is what I do at home, but who are actually for kids who carry their lunches and their school equipment in those plastic bags. So I think there's got to be, Chair, if I could encourage you when you speak to this, just to remind them of the equitable outcomes we want to seek for some of our communities as well. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you, Councillor Collins. And I know this issue's been raised a lot. And one of the issues that we're looking at, the Mayor referenced the fact that we're drowning in fabric. We're worried about plastic, but we have fabric, tons and tons and tons of it going into our landfills every year. The opportunity to create boomerang bags and alternatives is huge. We need to get that cloth out of the landfills and be making those kids' bags to carry their equipment and whatever else they need. And that can be done for free. It can be done by social enterprise. It can be done by a variety of organisations, and that's how we need to be thinking, rather than simply presuming that some of our communities under stress don't deserve better. So I think we need to tackle that head on. And I just want to give a bit of a shout out to Kerry Hannafin from Countdown. The Mayor's right. It was very, very hard to even get the discussion going. Kerry's been an absolute breath of fresh air. She's the one who, like a tornado, went through Countdown and said, just get rid of those damn plastic straws and just do it. So, there are, within the corporate sector, some very good people acting as a force for good. No more questions, no more comments. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Parul and team. It's appreciated. Moving on to item 10. Sorry, we've done item 10. Moving on to item 11, which is our reserve revocation report. And just briefly, warm welcome, Carl. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Carl May Aho. I'm reporting on the iwi and public notification of the proposal to revoke the reserve status of 4 properties previously cleared for disposal by the Finance and Performance Committee. And I am seeking approval to request the Department of Conservation to remove the reserve status of these properties. In summary, all 4 properties were bundled together for notification. Iwi were notified by letter with email follow-ups, and the public were notified by a series of notices in regional newspapers and on the council website. Only one property actually attracted any comment, and that was the reserve adjacent to 155 Bombay Road. Mana Whenua did not object, but we did have a request from Ngati Tamauho that the land be returned to iwi. Panuku responded that the land is vested in Auckland Council and there is no underlying Crown ownership, and therefore the land is not subject to the right of first refusal provisions of the Mana Whenua or Tamaki Makaurau Collective Redress Act. But we did undertake that we would give them advance notice of any marketing if the property's reserve status is uplifted. Members of the public, we received 4 objections. These were hand-delivered to the Pukekohe Service Centre on the 20th of July. They didn't go into detail, but they all requested that the council consider potential uses, potential community uses for the reserve. We wrote to the 4 objectors, setting out our reasons, setting out the reasons behind the proposal to revoke the reserve status and inviting them to withdraw their objections. And we then sent up follow-up letters suggesting that we could meet with them to discuss their concerns. But nobody withdrew their objections.
Okay.
So I'm ready to take questions.
Lovely, thank you, Carl. It's reasonably straightforward. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yeah, I've just got one question on further consideration since the Finance Committee meeting, and that's around 66R Halbury Road in Mangere. And my question goes to the timing around this item. I note that this particular piece of land abuts a much larger area of land which could come up for sale. There could be some subdivision there, and conceivably offer the opportunity for some local walkway, cycleway access. Is that something that's been considered?
Through the chair, I think that would be a question that would need to be put to the strategy and engagement team who put the properties through the clearance process. It's not something that we in the disposals team would really involve ourselves with.
So just further to this, Madam Chair, I just wonder if you might consider deferring that particular part of the item.
I'll just ask Dean to comment.
It's a bit unfortunate we didn't have the question before now, so we could have answered it fully. So what I'm trying to do is think through how we can maybe approve the disposals that we've got here, but come back to you, Councillor Walker, with an answer around the consideration of how this might fit into other cycle or foot walkways. And if there is a gap there, then we can tell the team to pull it. But I'm working on the assumption that all those issues have been thought through prior, and that's a safe assumption based on track record, that these issues have generally been thought through, and that's why they are non-serviced land. Rather than pulling it now. So my advice would be we have notification of intention to revoke the reserve status. It'll go through a process. We will pick up any of those issues on the way through. Yeah, that would be my advice. Approve it and then allow us to go through the process. If there's a gap there, then of course it wouldn't go through to disposal.
Okay.
Sure. Just further to the question I've raised, how can the matter that I've raised be highlighted within the process? So, for example, if it was deemed that there's an opportunity for a walkway, cycleway, and that meets with council policy, and that might mean that we want to retain part of this site, then how can we identify that sort of opportunity through this process so my comments don't just disappear into the ether?
I guess, councillor, that's part of the reason for it going to the local board first, and I would presume that that would be canvassed with the local board. Councillor Filipaina.
I was going to ask the question around, had it gone to the local board knowing that it has? Because the local board, when you look at issues, I mean, we just seem to be interfering with the local board decision. And that's exactly what we don't want to end up doing. And I've heard this around this table, so, you know, if I had known that this question was going to be raised, as the officer said, I would have texted or rung the chair of the Māngere o Tahu local board and asked her what the view is. So, look, I don't support it. I don't support deferring it. I don't support putting it on hold, because everybody knows the track record for the Māngere o Tahu local board and around future streets, around cycling, you know. So, you know, I just feel a wee bit uncomfortable in regards to the potential perception of interference.
Can I just add to that? Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. And I was just refreshing my memory about the context of the decision that you're making today. And if you refer to paragraphs 10 through 16, you'll find there, and it's common language, all of these were cleared for sale by the Finance and Performance Committee on the 17th of April 2018. So this discussion has been had before by members of this committee in the context of finance performance. So it's been through the process, it's been agreed to for sale. You're now at the point where you need to agree to revoke the reserve status. So I think that's the point that you're at in this process. There's been several goes at it. My recommendation is you continue.
Fair enough. Okay, Member Blair.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there, when these properties are for sale, is there a process where the mana whenua have an opportunity to purchase?
We give mana whenua advance notice of any marketing. We don't offer a right of first refusal, but we do give advance notice, so to allow mana whenua groups to consult and decide whether they wish to participate in the process.
Sorry, so that's all the mana whenua do get consulted?
Yes, well, they get notified, yes.
Notified. And are there any cultural equity kind of arrangements with regards to them if they have a cultural association to that land, or is it just market, the market wins?
As far as the speaking through the chair on behalf of the disposals team, generally any cultural equity issues would have been handled during the clearance process. So when we come to market the property, we undertake to give iwi advance notification, but that's as far as it goes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, Councillor Cashmore.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair. Just as far for the councillor's knowledge, 155 Bombay Road, there was commentary on social media that this was in fact another site that the council was selling adjacent to the school, which caused a bit of hubris on social media. Once that was corrected, the actual facts put in, the contention died away.
Facts on social media are strangers, mostly. I'll put the recommendation. Oh, Councillor Filipaina.
Just a clarification. I was wrong about the local board. It was Otara Papatoetoe local board, and the address is in Māngere, but it's the local board boundary. So it was the Otara Papatoetoe local board who were consulted and approved the item, Chair.
Okay.
Clarification.
And before I put it, it does need a mover. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Are you happy to second, Councillor Filipaina? Thank you. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Carl. Our next item, we've got the presentation by Councillor Wayne Walker on the ICLEI conference. I am just going to call a 2-minute comfort stop, and if you can be back reasonably quickly because we still have several items to get through, and we'll work out whether we can finish by lunch or not, depending on how quickly everyone comes back. Thank you. Haere mai. Let's make a start. Right, Wayne, if you start, I think people will come and join in. So we've reconvened and the next 10 minutes is yours. 10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking to a short report around a trip that I made to Montreal for the ICLEI World Conference. That's something that comes up every 3 years, and it's a particular conference that I try and make sure that I attend because from my perspective it's actually the most productive conference that I go to, and for that matter have been to. There was a question earlier from the Mayor, what does ICLEI stand for? It's a rather clumsy acronym, but it stands for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. And just so that councillors know, it's the lead organisation across local government around climate change and issues to do with sustainability. And it forms a really important part between what might be the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, the Conference of the Parties, the COP21s and so on that occur, and local government. So it gives local government an opportunity to be present at an international level. And it's an incredible organisation in terms of what it does around advocacy. So various things happen at the ICLEI conferences. Normally there's a strategy or a declaration that you sign up to. I presented a paper around the circular economy, which is something that Auckland Council has been involved with, and I very much appreciate the support that I got from the Sustainable Business Network that had put some effort around that. While I was the only person from Auckland, there was Aaron Hawkins from Dunedin, there were people from Sydney and Melbourne and other councils in Oceania, and that was a picture of the Oceania delegation. And quite obviously, there were councillors, people in local government, officers, consultants, business, across a whole range of cities, towns, across the world. ICLEI's got a membership of about 1,500 local government institutions. A variety of presentations around various matters. Those matters included resilience, eco-mobility, financing, insurance. The breadth of things that happen at these conferences is quite considerable. There are multiple workshops occurring at any given point in time, and it's a real challenge just to get around what's available. ICLEI's got 5 pathways. I'll just cover those off very briefly. Low emissions, effectively focusing around climate change. Circular development, I was presenting around that. Equitable and people-centred development. Nature-based development, and resilient development. And within those pathways, there are in excess of 130 programs that have already been developed for local government. And one of the messages that I would put across is there is ample opportunity for Auckland Council to engage in work that other cities are working on collaboratively across all sorts of things, in the water space, in the mobility space, in the funding space, the procurement space. I note that our council interacts with other cities and towns in the procurement space in ICLEI, but there are many other opportunities. So I'm just flashing through. While I was in Montreal, I visited a historic monument. That was the Biosphere, which was based on Buckminster Fuller's design that was put in place in 1967. I'd also make the comment that at the conference I had an opportunity to meet with various sister cities. For example, I met with a delegation from Taichung. There were people there from Los Angeles and a variety of other cities that we interact with. And I would also note that there are cities such as Melbourne that, like Auckland, are also members of C40, which is a complementary organisation that we're a membership, that we belong to. A couple of highlights for me from the ICLEI conference were around two things. One, an initiative around urban nature, which I think our city has got a wonderful opportunity to engage around, and that is around the importance of establishing nature in cities, especially given the circumstance that in the not too distant future, as much as half of humanity will be in cities. So instilling nature in cities is incredibly important, and there are a lot of cities doing a lot of good work in that area, and I think Auckland could play a strong role there. And the other area that ICLEI is applying some effort into is around the importance of science as it goes to cities, that goes to data, goes to the templates around how that science is communicated across cities. And one of the great things that ICLEI does is it recognises what are some of the problems at a high level and brings cities together to deal with those problems. And you might not think that science is much of an issue, but what you'll see across cities is often they've got all sorts of different scientific platforms, and accumulating common knowledge and achieving benchmarking is actually quite difficult. So ICLEI's putting some work in that area. While I was away, I also covered off a number of things. There were various cities that had bridges with walkways and cycleways. That's the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I also checked out light rail and heavy rail across a number of cities. Checked out recycling initiatives. That's a location in Stonehaven in Scotland that also had a food waste collection system already up and running, as did a number of Scottish cities. Amongst other things, I visited some town halls. This is Belfast, and Councillor Watson had also visited this particular town hall and brought to my attention that the mayors that are elected on a yearly basis actually have a picture up on the wall, and the town hall is used a lot for civic functions like weddings and so on. And when I was there, there was a wedding in place. In fact, there were a number of weddings on this particular day.
And
You gate crashed.
New revenue
Wedding crasher, yeah.
So I think this is an area where the mayor could take a lead, and where our city could take a lead, because
already married.
This building, well, you know, I did cover off recycling. I won't go into that in any detail, but reuse, recycle, and so on, they're all good concepts. So
I think you'll have to explain yourself to my wife.
There are big opportunities, I think, for us to make much better use of this space, because much of the time it's significantly underutilised. I also visited town squares and city squares. This was Lisbon, and I was there watching the World Cup on a really big screen. Equally, I visited a number of World Heritage sites, and that was particularly around the relevance of our Mumba. That's Carcassonne in France, which is the second most popular place in France after Paris, and it's a castle city. I've commended that to the mayor as a place to visit. I think you'd get a lot out of it, Phil.
Beautiful.
Looks lovely.
It's magnificent. Another castle city, in this case, this was Lisbon, which had a marvellous parks network. Barcelona, architectural works of Gaudi were phenomenal. So a lot of takeouts. I made the observation when I was checking out some stadiums, particularly in London and other cities, that often you've got stadiums and very large stadiums that are in residential areas. And I was staying in proximity to Emirates Stadium, Arsenal in London, and that was certainly the case. So I think we could go a long way learning from other cities. So really productive conference. I was grateful for the council and largely through myself using some of my fund to pay for the registration for that conference. So happy to answer any questions, fellow councillors and mayor.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Wayne. Any questions? Oh, that looks like a tour de force. Mr. Mayor.
Apart from recycling my marriage, which I won't comment on, thank you, Councillor. I just wondered whether, when you were in the Belfast Town Hall, whether you noticed they had a big tapestry of the Battle of the Boyne. And where this is relevant is to our concept of an inclusive city, because I remember the guy showing me through the town hall, and he's, I said, well, what's the tapestry? I didn't know Irish history that well. And he spoke of the Battle of the Boyne, which I think, historians might correct me, was 200 or 300 years ago, but it was like it happened yesterday.
1690.
1690. Thank you. You can always tell a former history teacher. And it was, they held on to the grievances for hundreds of years. And then in my naivety, I was a bit younger in those days, I said, oh, my wife's from Ireland. And the guy said, and what would be her name? And I said, Moriarty. And his eyes narrowed to little slits, and he said, she's from the south. So, one of the things that we learn from places like that is that we are New World, and we leave those things behind us, and we have an inclusive society where we hopefully don't hold on to those grievances. But I just thought I'd add those stories in. Thank you, Wayne, and I won't be recycling my marriage.
Sure. If I can just respond to the comments that you made, Mr. Mayor, I would just make the observation that not only was the tapestry there, but you had within the various rooms that you went in the history of the city, the civic history of the city. It was very engaging. You had an opportunity to wear the council gowns. I wore the gown of the Lord Mayor, so it was very interactive. And you came away from visiting that town hall with a huge sense of place and history and currency around that city. And again, I say, we could copy that. We could steal that idea, and I am sure that any number of people, both within Auckland and visitors, would love to tour through our town hall.
Thank you, Councillor. There's some food for thought there. Deputy Mayor.
Quick one, yep.
We could share your robes.
Yeah, maybe not. Wayne, so Emirates Stadium, you talked about Arsenal, was that right? Arsenal?
Yep.
How many games or events do they have there a year?
A lot.
Don't do this.
A lot. I mean, I can't. I didn't check that out, but there was certainly stuff going on when I was there, and I spoke to local people, and they were totally enamoured living so close to the grounds.
Active busy stadium.
Indeed they were, and I'd like to at this stage say thank you, Councillor. That was actually a really good presentation. And I would move that we receive.
I'll second
the presentation. Thank you, Councillor Casey. And I think we all need to put our hands up for who wants to be the High Sheriff, IBAGS being that first. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Wayne. That was really, really good. Item 13, excuse me, is the summary of our information updates. Would someone just like to move that? Councillor Casey?
No, I have a question.
Remember, we don't have the staff here to answer the
Dean's here.
questions. Okay. If he can, he will, but we do encourage people to ask the questions on the item directly to the staff who've produced the memos. Councillor
It's not a
Casey.
memo. Oh, well, maybe it is. It's just an update on the injunction on the 1080 drop.
and we'll cover that at the end of the meeting. So, because I'm not even sure if we've got any more information other than it happens on Thursday.
That's all the information we have. It happens on Thursday.
Do we know what the terms of the nature of the complaint is? We haven't had the documents.
I've only read about it in the media. They're worried about the impact apparently on the water. They've entirely missed the point that we closed the dams and we've done this and it has gone successfully in the past. The whole process hasn't been held up. We drop the initial feed baits and then at a later date we drop the 1080. This has not made any impact on the timeline so far. So there's nothing else to report, but if people want to have a quick discussion about it at the end of the meeting, they're most welcome to. I'll move, it's been moved by Councillor Simpson,
No,
seconded.
you can move, Madam Chair, it's your thing. I was just trying to be helpful.
No, that's good. You move. Deputy Chair, seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against. Carried. Thank you. And Craig, the next item is yours. Now, it's just, it has just been brought to my attention, and Councillor Lee may wish to comment or not, and the issues are entirely in his hands, but Councillor Lee, you are a submitter on this process, so we just note that.
I intend to declare that, Madam Chair.
That's good. Councillor Lee has declared that, and we've noted it. Craig.
Tihei Moriora, te whare e tunei tēnā koe, te papa ki waho tēnā koe. Ko Craig McElroy, tōku ingoa. Ko te General Manager, ko wai ora raupu auhau. No reira ne mihi nui kia koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the St Mary's Bay and Macefield Beach Water Quality Improvement Project. This is a very exciting project for Healthy Waters because for the first time we're bringing the water quality targeted rate to life. This is truly a transformative project that is going to have a major impact on water quality at both St Mary's Bay and at Macefield Beach. And the budget is somewhere north of $30 million to deliver this outcome. We obviously won't know the final number till we've been through the contracting process for construction. But that's the indicative budget that we're talking about. So a very large sum of money, and it's just indicative of the type of monies that have to be spent when we're dealing with these big legacy issues. Good aspects of the project is because we're using tunnelling technology, it's actually very good from a carbon and sustainability viewpoint. The other thing about this project is there's been a massive amount of community and consultation to get where we've got to today. And this is all about reducing overflows into the harbour from the current combined sewer network. And this is only the first step of all of the Western Isthmus activities. So you'll be seeing lots of me over the next year or two as all the planning for the Western Isthmus all comes to a conclusion. I'd like to acknowledge the close relationship we've had with Watercare throughout this project. Obviously, when you're talking about combined sewer overflows, the nexus between Healthy Waters and Watercare is very close. And so this really is an illustrative slide to indicate the current level of overflows, which is in the order of 200 plus in a typical year. And the final solution is, in the interim, something like 20 overflows occurring at the outfall. So literally an order of magnitude improvement, but not only is it an order of magnitude improvement, it's also in a part of the harbour where there is a lot more assimilative capacity, a lot more mixing will take place, and a dramatic improvement in water quality in respect of this particular situation. So this is all about improved public health risk outcomes, better amenity, and it is a significant step towards restoring the Māori of the harbour. Obviously, in an ideal world, we are running an aggressive timetable because it would be wonderful to have this work in place by late 2020, which would obviously predate the America's Cup 2021 event. And the paper today that we'll be talking about in the confidential part of the agenda is around the space that's required to build some of the critical infrastructure that's required to support this project. Anything that involves building tunnels requires quite a bit of other infrastructure to support the tunnel operation. So this is just a little diagrammatic illustration of the key components of the project. So the green line is the tunnel that's going that will be constructed, and the yellow is there are two yellow options at the moment where we have a consenting process which is designed to offer up both alternatives within the consent framework, and the area in black that is highlighted there is the infrastructure that's required to support the black writing that's required, the black highlight that's required to support the infrastructure around the need for a pump station and some odour control facilities. Just where we are in the process, we lodged a fully notified construction resource consent. That consent has had full mana whenua support, and we actually have the hearing starting next Tuesday on this project, and we're anticipating a decision by mid-October. And obviously, the consultation with the community is an ongoing process. Also, we want to take advantage of this level of expenditure to make sure the project achieves some great social and environmental outcomes. I think going forward, it's something that I know the whole council family is now taking very seriously. And so there are wonderful opportunities both in respect of the landscaping and the urban design process, and mana whenua involvement will be really critical in that urban design process, and will also involve the urban design teams within the council family as well. I think there's a neat opportunity to work with the local community and achieve some good things for the local community. Also, what we can do with some of the local schools as well. I think this could fit in very well with the curriculum around both the environmental and science components of the school curriculums, and we're keen to work with the local schools, and also the opportunity with the contractor to develop new career opportunities in the works that are required on this project, because this contract is going to be the first of many contracts of this nature over the next 10 years. And so although we're talking today about St Mary's Bay Macefield Beach project, there'll be many similar projects that are part of the Western Isthmus work coming up over the next 10 years. And so I think the framework we put in place for this first tranche is significant, not only because of this particular opportunity, but also because of the myriad opportunities that are coming forward in the future. Already mentioned that the environmental outcomes delivered through the tunnelling, which is a good low carbon methodology. Also, we're working closely with Ngāti Whātua Ōraki's local nursery with the landscaping and opportunity to use plants from that nursery. And also working with the supply chain, making sure that we minimise our material usage and give effect as best as we can to Council's zero waste policy. We think these projects really do need to be exemplars of where we're wanting to take the family operations going forward. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will be discussing the land acquisition shortly in the confidential section of the meeting. We also have to achieve, not only do we have a resource consent application that's starting next week, we also have to achieve specific property owner approvals under the Local Government Act, where the tunnel is going directly under individual properties. And at the moment, we've still got some outstanding objections from property owners. Most of the property owners' approvals have already been granted. So we had just a bit over 100 property owner approvals required, of which I think 15 are unresolved at the moment. And at this stage, that's planned to have a hearing, a council regulatory committee hearing in November to resolve those outstanding issues. We also will be going back to the Strategic Procurement Committee in December with a view to probably having a short list of contractors with a view to awarding the contract over the Christmas period, and we've already had a subcommittee appointed to give effect to that particular opportunity, because we really are very keen to see construction start early in 2019, and we have a 2-year construction window with a planned completion in December 2020. So happy to answer any questions on the generality of the project.
Thank you. Kia ora, thank you, Craig, and thank you for your introduction. Just reminding people that we do have the details of possible land purchases and the rest of the item in confidence. So questions of a general nature. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Got a few questions. So I understand that this is going to provide an overflow capacity. In respect of the network itself, which is a combined sewer and stormwater, are we actively separating that network?
Yes, we have a number of separation projects underway already, and this work has all been done collaboratively with Watercare. So we already have first of all, we've done separation work in Franklin Road already. We have separation works underway in Freeman's Bay at the moment, and we have separation works underway in Waterview at the moment. So these are all areas within the Western Isthmus catchment. What we have agreed with Watercare is that in order to look at the potential for separation in St Mary's Bay and Herne Bay, the work can only be properly costed if there's a very detailed property by property evaluation carried out to look exactly what would be required to do that separation work. And so Watercare at the moment are in the process of commissioning a contractor to do that work, and it's been agreed that Watercare will take the lead on that work, but it will be 50-50 cost sharing with Healthy Waters. That way, when we come to make decisions around combined versus separate sewers, it's done in the full knowledge of exactly what the costs and the benefits are associated with that work.
Okay, just got a further question in respect of that. Have we considered the possibility of a targeted rate in areas where separation is desirable?
This project, of course, is already funded through a targeted rate. The rationale for the targeted rate for this particular project is that the benefit is a regional benefit, not a local benefit. Everyone benefits from a clean harbour, and so that's how we've put the whole package together for the Western Isthmus. As you recall, it was presented to the environment community last October at an assessed current cost of $1.85 billion. These are current dollars, of which $1.5 billion, circa $1.5 billion, was to be funded by Watercare, and the balance to be funded through Healthy Waters and the targeted rate. And Watercare agreed as part of that program to bring $400 million forward in the LTP in order to support the overall project objectives.
Okay, the other question I've got is, because this is changing where the overflow is going, and quite obviously it's not going to be going into St Mary's Bay, does it follow that there'll be less sediment going into St Mary's Bay that might be carried by the stormwater?
There'll definitely be less sediment load going into St Mary's Bay, so not only will there be a microbiological improvement in water quality, there'll be a ecological improvement in water quality as well.
And in respect of the Macefield Beach discharge, which was where everything is going, is it likely that we'll see a decline in quality there because that's where all the overflow is going to be going?
No, not at all. At the moment, the actual Macefield Beach overflow occurs right on the edge of the beach. right next to the motorway. We're actually planning to take the overflow out into deep water adjacent to the harbour bridge, and all of the modelling indicates a dramatic improvement in water quality in respect of these particular locations because of that shift.
Yeah.
And also the dramatically reduced frequency, because the tunnel will also be acting as a storage tunnel, and so that's the other reason that the frequency of the overflows will be reduced so much, because we can hold the flows back until the system is available for either have a pump back into the water care network for the initial flows as the current design concept, and then those wet weather events that are relatively clean stormwater are safe to be released into the harbour.
So that was the other question I was going to ask. Under project outcomes, overflow events in a typical year, 107 before, 0 after. Is that actually correct? Because my understanding is we're still going to have overflows, they're just going to be further out.
That is in relation to the physical beach location itself. And so the new outfall location, which is mid-channel, we've been entirely open and honest with the community. We're saying there'll be 20 overflows a year initially occurring at that location, but the effect of those overflows will be minimal because of the nature of the overflow, both from a quality point of view, but also the dramatically reduced frequency as well.
Sure. If I can, through you, Madam Chair, make a suggestion that we vary this picture so that it's a little bit more representative of what will actually be happening, which is that there will be overflows, and sure there might be 20, but they'll be further out, because right now it looks as though there's nothing happening.
Well, says it there.
Sorry, I was just distracted for a second. I think, do you want to respond to that, Craig? Because I think the answer you gave said that what we've got in here is actually correct.
Look, all I've given you is a little snapshot of some of the material that was prepared for the public workshops that we've had on the project and the various open days, etc. We've been very open and upfront with the community and everyone else about what the current situation is, what the proposed situation is at the end of 2020, and what we believe will be achieved in 2026 when the water care project has the tunnel extended all the way to Grey Lynn, which then changes the whole way that the system operates significantly once again.
Drops at 20 down to 2.
All right, we'll let you cogitate on that for a moment, Councillor. Just to note,
I've done my cogitation.
You've done.
And my position stands.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Lee.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment rather than question?
Yep.
First of all, I'll declare that I have lodged a submission on this application. I want to acknowledge Craig and Healthy Waters for the consultation they've undertaken over nearly 2 years in regard to this project. But in order to be transparent, I have to say that the more the community, and the community has become extremely well informed technically on these matters, and the community in this particular case is led by the chair of the St Mary's Bay Association, who's also the co-chair of SASOC, Stop Auckland Sewerage Overflows Coalition, Judge David Abbott, who presented to the council on the long-term plan. The more technical information they've amassed from Healthy Waters, from Water Care, and from other expert sources, the less supportive they have become of this project. And in fact, there's quite widespread opposition to it. I can, just to be transparent again, to add into what Craig has been saying, the concern is that sewage contaminated stormwater, which is currently by and large going into West Haven, will be diverted to Massfield Beach to the west of the Harbour Bridge. And the overflows, as Craig has indicated, will be discharged into the channel, out in the middle of the channel by the Harbour Bridge. There is concern about in the 21st century, spending $45 million to ultimately discharge sewage-contaminated stormwater into the harbour. But there is also concern from modelling, expert modelling, that a lot of this stuff will flow back in and close by the Western Bays, St Mary's Bay and Herne Bay, and even further into the Meola Inlet for several days after. So that's, in summary, the concerns the public have about this project. They would much prefer the money be spent on separation of stormwater and sewage rather than a 45 million going into a project which will either discharge into the harbour or actually send the stuff back into the already past use by date combined system. So that's why, if you read this report, you may see this as entirely benign and beneficial, and then members may be surprised that there is public opposition to it. This will, I guess, unfold during the hearing, so I'll leave it at that.
It will. Any other comments? Councillor Simpson and Councillor Hills. Remembering that we have made the decision and we will be talking about the land purchases in the next one. Councillor Simpson.
So my question to you, Craig, is around the fact that we've chosen this project out of the targeted rate to enhance water quality, right? You've got a community that, and the reason we've got the targeted rate is we're trying to bring forward a whole lot of work program that was way out here, and the quicker we do it, the better our water quality goes up. If we've got a community, as Councillor Lee has just stated, that actually says we've got concerns around this project, we potentially don't want it, is there a second project or a third project that we could potentially do? Why are we focused on progressing this one if locally there appears to have a judge-led residents association in opposition?
All I can say in response to that question is the option that we've evaluated has been chosen very carefully, because whether or not the final decision in this catchment is a fully combined catchment, a fully separated catchment, or some combination of both scenarios, this solution is required regardless of which of those three options lands. Because what I can say with absolute confidence to you, if the decision is made to fully separate the catchment, that will take many, many years to achieve a fully separated outcome. And until you've got a fully separated outcome, you will always have wastewater contamination in the stormwater. That is just a reality of life. And so this project, we believe, is a very wise investment to future-proof both the short-term situation, but also provide an option that works for all long-term scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's as clear an answer as you could possibly get. And from a regional perspective, we have other highly critical areas that we need to spend our constrained budget on, and one would have to say this is a critical area and an area of high importance. It's not the only area in Auckland, and at the moment this is the best piece of kit that we can put forward for this solution. And as Craig says, if somehow we win the council version of Lotto and we did do an entire separation process, this piece of kit would still be required. I've got Councillor Hills next.
So yeah, my main question is, so this would does this take the overflows from 206 to up to 22 in a more diluted sense away from where people are?
So at the moment, between Macefield Beach and St Mary's Bay, there's circa 200 overflows in a typical year. And so with the pump back scenario that's currently planned, the quality of the stormwater will be dramatically, or the combined flow will be dramatically increased. And also, because they're using the storage capacity in the pipeline, we'll be able to reduce the frequency of the overflow as well. And the point that needs to be made with the modelling work that's been done is that when you look at this situation in isolation from everything else, there is no impact whatsoever on the beach water quality. None of that modelling comes back to the beach. The point that Councillor Lee was making is confused by the fact that all the other overflows in the Western Isthmus, over 200 of them, are still going off. It's those 200 other overflows, even when this project is put into place, which is going to impact dramatically on beach quality. And until those 200 overflows are addressed, we will not be able to put the green flag up at all of those beaches. It's not a function of this project. What this project is doing is fixing 2 locations. We've still got many, many other locations that require investment in order to be resolved.
So once again, this will reduce by about almost 200 overflows a year, just this one project.
So we're going from 200 to 20, so that's a 10-fold increase in reduction in frequency, but also a substantial improvement in quality. When you add the reduced frequency and the quality components together, it's a very, very good outcome for these 2 specific locations. But we still have 198 locations left that have not been addressed, and some of them can't be addressed until the central interceptor is constructed, and some of them require other investment interventions as well. This is just the start of a 10-year journey to achieve our ideal state, which we have indicated previously, which is 10 sites will have 6 overflow, maximum of 6 overflows, and all other sites will have 2 or less overflows. And that was what was communicated to the Environment Committee last October, and that is the plan that we are still working to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I understand the logic in the reduction in overflows that primarily will come from additional storage capacity that's in the pipe. Has the alternative been looked at for simply creating alternative storage capacity without having the pipe and the change in the overflow? And I'd just be curious as to what the alternative cost is for that. And that is a project, for example, that North Shore City embarked on, Project Care, which was all about storage capacity in large part to mitigate against overflows.
It was 300 million 10 years.
So through you, Madam Chair, in actual fact, this is the most cost-effective way to create storage. If you had to build a large storage tank, the tank would be so huge, would take up all of the land that we want to acquire and more, would probably have to be at least 10 metres deep. And in actual fact, by putting in a horizontal boring machine, you not only create storage, but you're also creating conveyance at the same time. So it's actually a very elegant way of achieving both transmission capacity and storage at the same time.
Okay, I think we have had a good and robust discussion on this, remembering that this is probably about the 3rd time this has circled back through this committee. We are going to talk about the rest of the issues in confidence. Councillor Clow, you were happy to move.
Second.
Councillor Deputy Mayor is happy to second. I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Just one-way vote recorded
Carried.
again. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Walker, we will do that. Now, it's 1:45. I'm going to suggest that we break for half an hour because we have got the confidential section to come back to, and then we've got the finance workshop after that. So we'll stand adjourned for half an hour. Time time to just relax and enjoy some kai and come back. Thank you.
Filled up.
Yeah.